You've mastered the lightning magic, and you tell me I'm in a bizarre world? Hey, fanfic family. So glad to see you here again to continue this incredible adventure. As always, kindly remember, this story is 100% fiction. So don't go looking for dimensional portals in your closet. All rights to this fantastic novel belong to the original author. We're just your humble narrators of epic tales. Are you enjoying the fanfic? Show it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and dropping us a like. And if you're impatient for more exclusive content, our Patreon is your happy place. Chapter 1. Time flies in the mountains. Across a vast expanse of mist and clouds, mountains stretch endlessly and waters run deep. Deep within the gray mountains lies a narrow stone path, overgrown with weeds and moss, as if long-neglected woodcutters and traveling merchants have trod its steps. Following the path upwards, one sees several blossoming peach trees, enclosing a clearing in the center of which stands a thatched hut. A woodcutter's axe, a large wooden platform for stacking firewood, a chicken coop enclosed by branches. The small courtyard has everything, except for tables and chairs for entertaining guests. Behind the thatched hut is another clearing, where a tombstone stands. A young, handsome, plain-faced Taoist priest stands before the tombstone, sighing deeply. Master, I've studied for 2.5 years and reached the foundation establishment stage. Besides the merit-based Taoist methods that can increase the power of thunder magic, there's nothing else in our scriptures. I have to go down the mountain to find a new method. The young Taoist, appearing to be under 20, wore a crookedly high crown and a slightly worn Taoist robe. His right hand was behind his back, and his left hand held a Taoist scripture. He sighed repeatedly as he spoke to the old man inside the grave mound. Some time ago, Zuo Chen transmigrated to this world. Upon opening his eyes, he found himself before a dying old Taoist. This is a chaotic world. Without the true methods, you cannot leave the mountain. The old Taoist exclaimed, his beard bristling and eyes wide, before his head fell from his neck and landed in Zuo Chen's arms. Zuo Chen nearly wet himself in fright. This experience left a lasting psychological scar on him. After burying the old Taoist, Zuo Chen dared not leave the mountain. He hid in the old Taoist's dilapidated thatched hut, burying himself in the Taoist scriptures. He spent a considerable amount of time diligently studying and practicing, eventually passing the key refining stage and reaching foundation establishment. Then the problem arose. This Taoist scripture could only support his cultivation up to the foundation establishment stage, and then there were no further cultivation instructions. He was stuck there. He sighed deeply, never expecting that after hiding on the mountain for so long, he would eventually have to descend to seek the path to immortality. Zuo Chen knew that he couldn't hide on the mountain forever. There were no cultivation resources or rare treasures on the mountain. Spiritual energy was barely sufficient, but that was all. Moreover, for the past 2.5 years, Zuo Chen's mouth had become so blind that he could hardly taste anything. Although the foundation establishment stage allowed for fasting, Zuo Chen was greedy. Without food, his mouth was truly tasteless, and Zuo Chen couldn't give up his appetite, so he could only seek out some good food to satisfy his hunger. But before descending the mountain, Zuo Chen still felt uneasy. He was only at the foundation establishment stage, which in the cultivation world was practically worse than a pig or a dog. Even the old Taoist had his head chopped off. What was he worth? Standing before the grave, he sighed, but Zuo Chen finally composed himself. Having picked up the old Taoist scriptures, Zuo Chen had called him master. Now, leaving the small courtyard where he had spent 2 years, Zuo Chen felt he should say goodbye to the old Taoist. Back in the thatched hut, Zuo Chen spent some time finding a bamboo hat, stuffing the Taoist scriptures and some dried venison wrapped in oiled paper inside. He slung a small bag over his shoulder and went into the courtyard. Reaching the edge of the courtyard, he looked back several times before finally making up his mind and stepping out. Now it was time to venture out on his own. He hoped the cultivation world wasn't so underworldly. If he was lucky enough to form a golden core, he'd honestly find a sect and become a minor retainer, living a life of leisure. Thinking this, he walked down the overgrown steps, his attention drawn to the vegetation. The grass grows so fast. The stone steps look like they were about to break. Zuo Chen wondered. Gray mountain stretches for 200 li, high and treacherous, densely forested, with numerous villages nestled at its foot, their houses separated from the outside by fences and wooden walls. Today, a street performer came to Nuzi village, pulling a donkey cart, smashing stones with a jar on his head, and making quite a few copper coins. During his midday break, the street performer squatted under a tree eating flatbread, watching the village children as he ate. He called out twice, and several children ran over. The street performer beamed and took out some candy, giving one to each child. Is there anything interesting happening in the village? There's nothing fun in the village, just farming every day. The child munched on candy, but up in the mountain, my master said there are immortals. Is there an immortal? The street performer's face stiffened slightly. Yes, they say that 60 years ago, there was an old immortal on the mountain, with a little immortal. Whenever there was trouble in the village, the old immortal could solve it. And now? I heard that 60 years ago, one night, a cloud appeared on Grey Mountain, and thunder roared for most of the night. Then the old immortal and the little immortal never came down again. 60 years, oh well. The street performer felt relieved. These days, living to 40 is considered impressive, living to 60 is rare, and living to 80 means you're already on your way to the underworld. The old immortal might have been skilled 60 years ago, but 60 years later he's long since turned to dust. The little immortal? He's probably long since gone down the mountain to find another way. Seeing that it was getting late, several calls for children to eat came from the village. The village children stopped talking to the street performer, answered, and turned to run, but their legs wouldn't move. The street performer chuckled, reaching out as if picking fruit, and scooped up the children. The children immediately quieted down when he grabbed them by the back of their collars, remaining motionless and silent. The street performer then took out the jar he had kicked during the day and threw the children in one by one. This jar, large enough to hold an entire adult, was now crammed with 6 or 7 children. It was dark and bottomless inside. After that, he pulled his cart, humming a little tune, and headed out of the village. Street performers can't get rich, but opportunity lies under the ginseng fruit tree. What are you doing? Suddenly, a young man's cold voice came from behind the street performer. The cart stopped halfway, and the street performer's neck stiffened. He turned around. A young Taoist priest wearing a crooked tall hat was walking down from the direction of the mountain, his eyes fixed on the jar. Cold sweat instantly streamed down the street performer's forehead. When did this Taoist priest get behind me? He came down from the mountain. Is there a Taoist temple on Grey Mountain? Suppressing his astonishment, the street vendor forced a simple smile. Young Taoist priest, I'm just out here trying to make a living. Let's keep to ourselves. I have 2 taels of silver in my pocket. Would you like some? Really? That's quite a bit. Zuo Chen said as he walked towards the vendor, who chuckled and reached for his donkey cart. Suddenly, he pulled out a donkey hide. He draped the hide over Zuo Chen's head. Skinning and rooting. Young Taoist priest, I happen to need a donkey to pull the cart. The vendor's eyes gleamed with malice. His skinning and rooting technique could turn a strong man into a hard-working ox in the countryside. How could this scholar-looking Taoist possibly break his spell? Seeing the hide already on Zuo Chen, the vendor felt a surge of smugness. But before he could even revel in his triumph for a few seconds, he suddenly saw Zuo Chen rip the hide off. This. The street vendor's eyes widened in disbelief. Even someone with training couldn't possibly withstand his incredible skill by brute force. They'd either need a paper doll as a substitute or a somersault to dodge. How could someone have skin plastered on their face and still manage to tear it off? You're blinded by your own skin, why don't you run? Zuo Chen's gaze turned cold. He placed his right hand to his lips, spread it out, and blew a breath at the street vendor. The street vendor felt an immediate chill, as if he'd been transported to the Arctic. Moments later, ice crystals formed on his eyebrows, his lips turned bluish-purple, and his body became completely bloodless. That single breath had nearly frozen him to death. Retracting his hand, Zuo Chen shook his head helplessly. I didn't expect to run into a street vendor as soon as I came down the mountain. This world is truly chaotic. Chapter 2 The Village. Several black earthenware jars were placed on the donkey cart. The donkey, startled by Zuo Chen's earlier breath, turned to run away. Zuo Chen reached out his left hand and grabbed the reins, immobilizing the donkey, which could only spin in place. He tapped the jars with his index finger, and 7 or 8 children tumbled out with a clatter. They sat on the ground, dumbfounded, as if their souls had left their bodies, neither crying nor making a sound, simply looking up at Zuo Chen. Zuo Chen blew on the children again, and their previously pale eyes gradually brightened. Then they burst into tears. Hearing the cries, The surrounding villagers swarmed over, some carrying rolling pins, some hoes, and others pitchforks. Zuo Chen quickly explained to the villagers, who then noticed a nearly frozen human teeth on the ground. A Foundation establishment cultivator like Zuo Chen wasn't afraid to fight these mortals, but he was particularly afraid of the one wielding the pitchfork. That thing is enchanted. After spending some time sorting out the whole story, the villagers were extremely grateful to Zuo Chen, especially the parents who had almost lost their children. They were practically begging him on their knees. Zuo Chen, however, was quite indifferent. It was just a small favor for him. After all, now that he had reached the Foundation establishment stage, he was worlds apart from ordinary mortals. Zuo Chen had a pure energy in his danshan that could be blown out through his mouth. This energy could freeze stones when cold, melt winter snow when hot, and even bring the grass and trees in the soil back to life with a little force, one of the small tricks he now knew. After understanding what had happened, the villagers surrounded the slave trader and beat him mercilessly with sticks. The man, who was already barely clinging to life, was beaten to death, and his body was dragged to a tree and hung there. The remaining villagers, at the village chief's behest, prepared to kill a chicken and cook a feast for Zuo Chen. Zuo Chen didn't want to trouble these seemingly poor villagers, but their enthusiasm was too much to bear, and it was indeed getting dark. Although he didn't need sleep, Zuo Chen still maintained his habit of resting at night, so he agreed. The village chief hosted a feast at his house. When they arrived, a large 8-immortal table was set out. Families whose children had been rescued contributed chickens and rice, and this small village managed to put together a meal with meat. The aroma was quite enticing, and Zuo Chen, who usually cooked his own rice on the mountain, was immediately tempted. "Thank you so much, young Taoist priest, for your help. If it weren't for you, who knows how many children would have been lost in our village." It's nothing. Zuo Chen didn't stand on ceremony, picking up a piece of meat with his chopsticks and eating it. The flavor lingered on his lips and teeth. The oil and broth tasted so good. After a few rounds of drinks, the village chief's face, flushed slightly by the village's strong liquor, looked Zuo Chen up and down, cautiously asking, "Young Taoist, did you come down from Grey Mountain?" "Yes. I lived on the mountain for over 2 years, and having mastered my skills, I'm planning to come down to find new avenues." Zuo Chen, enjoying his meal, added, "Village chief, do you know of any places nearby where I can learn skills? Like the kind of immortal sects that lead to higher cultivation?" "You mean immortal sects?" "I don't know, but there's a sect in King's House City nearby called the White Elder Society. The White Elder Society has many capable people. Whether you want to learn skills or gather information, it's much more convenient than coming from our village." Nodding, Zuo Chen noted down the name of the White Elder Society. He didn't dare underestimate any gangs in the city. After all, this was a cultivation world, and the leader of this small gang might even be a golden core cultivator. It wouldn't hurt to make contact. Just then, he heard the village chief. A series of thuds came from inside the house. The village chief rushed in upon hearing the noise and came out again shortly after. "I'm so sorry, my father is too old and his legs aren't very strong. He bumped into something." "It's all right." The spiritual energy in Zuo Chen's danshan surged upwards, gathering in his eyes. Through the wooden planks, Zuo Chen could see an old man huddled on the bed. In the reflection of his eyes, Zuo Chen could see many shadows within the old man's body. The old man was peering out a window, seemingly watching Zuo Chen, his lips moving slightly as if he wanted to say something. After a few seconds of thought, Zuo Chen took a red egg from his bamboo basket and handed it to the village chief. "This is a local specialty from the mountains. Village chief, why don't you let your father try it? He might like it." The village chief took the red eggs with some doubt, but nodded nonetheless, saying, "Thank you, young Taoist priest." After a hearty meal, the village chief arranged a woodshed for Zuo Chen to rest. Zuo Chen thanked him and was about to go in to meditate when the village chief stopped him. "Young Taoist priest, since you came from the mountains, have you seen an old immortal?" "An old immortal?" Zuo Chen was slightly taken aback. The image of an old Taoist priest's severed head flashed through his mind, and his expression became somewhat strange. "Yes, my father once went up the mountain to visit that old immortal. He was also wearing a Taoist robe. I saw you wearing the same robe, so I thought you might know him. The old Taoist priest you mentioned, I did know him, but he's dead." "Dead?" The village chief's eyes widened. How did he die? He must have been murdered. Zuo Chen thought to himself, a severed head couldn't be suicide. The village chief staggered back 2 steps, as if he couldn't stand up. His lips twitched slightly, but in the end, he could only sigh deeply. This world is in chaos, even the old immortals are dead. Zuo Chen wanted to say something, but saw the village chief stagger out of the guest room. He shook his head slightly and began to meditate cross-legged in the guest room. The village chief went to his inner room and saw his father lying on the bed, his breath weak. He finally took out a red-skinned egg. "Father, this is what the young Taoist priest asked me to give you. Please eat it, who knows, it might bring some supernatural power." Nothing more was said that night. The next morning, Zuo Chen packed his luggage, said goodbye to the village chief, and prepared to leave. After exchanging a few polite words with Zuo Chen, the village chief didn't see him off. As Zuo Chen got further and further away, the village chief also planned to go back into the house. But as soon as he turned his head, he suddenly saw a figure coming out of the house. Upon closer inspection, it was his father. "Father? You're all right." The village chief was startled, unsure if he'd seen a person or a ghost. He knew his father's illness all too well. He wasn't even in bed, let alone alive the next day. Yet now the old man's face was rosy, and he looked remarkably robust. The old man ignored the village chief, rushing into the courtyard. After looking around frantically, he cried out, "Where's the old immortal? Where's the old immortal?" "Father," the village chief's face paled. After a moment's hesitation, he said, "There's no old immortal. Yesterday, a young Taoist priest came." "What young Taoist priest?" The old man glared, smacking the village chief on the head. "I saw him through the window yesterday. That was the old immortal. He looks exactly like he did 60 years ago. Your grandfather said he looked just like him 120 years ago." "What?" The village chief was shocked and hurried towards the village entrance. But when he reached the entrance, Zuo Chen was nowhere to be seen. There is only one country road connecting to Kangayang Avenue. Chapter 3 Ghost Village. There are several roads from Grey Mountain to Qingzhou City, and the village chief pointed out the shortest one to Zuo Chen. Due to years of neglect, the road from the village to Qingzhou City was all muddy, making it inconvenient for traveling merchants. But for Zuo Chen, this muddy path was no obstacle. His Danshan Qi overflowed, gathering around his body and feet, making the muddy road seem like a smooth path to him. To outsiders, Zuo Chen only took 2 or 3 steps, yet he had already covered 100 meters, walking 100 feet with a leisurely stroll. This kind of shrinking the ground technique recorded in the Taoist scriptures is indeed convenient, Zuo Chen thought to himself. He also recalled what the village chief had said earlier. There were no bandit ends or evil people along the way. But this road was not without danger. Beside the muddy road was a deserted village, long abandoned, with no living people, only tombstones scattered everywhere. According to the old village chief, a girl who had married into the village from outside had some kind of conflict with the villagers. One day, she went to the city, but instead of buying rouge, she brought back a bag of arsenic. She first poisoned her own family of 5, then threw herself into a well. After drowning, her body remained erect, leaping out of the well in the middle of the night and transforming into a gust of cold wind that swept through the entire village. Afterwards, no one in the village survived, they all died there in vain. Even the big yellow dog guarding the village entrance couldn't escape it, turning into dried dog meat hanging on a tree at the village entrance. The reason few people from the city come to the foot of Grey Mountain is mainly because of this ghost village. The ghost village is filled with resentment, coming directly is dangerous, and going around it is troublesome. The city doesn't really need to do business with the village, so naturally, few people come. After hearing the village chief's lament, Zuo Chen kept this in mind, planning to check it out when he passed through the ghost village. If it weren't for some ghost cultivator refining the myriad soul banner, he planned to intervene. His foundation establishment stage technique of using a single breath of spiritual energy and shrinking the earth to an inch was merely simple manipulation of spiritual energy. His true specialty lay in the thunder techniques recorded in the Taoist scriptures. He didn't know many techniques like the 5 thunder orthodox method or palm thunder strike, but their power was considerable. Yang thunder was an extremely yang and powerful technique, specifically designed to combat ghosts and spirits. A single strike of yang thunder would send even a half-step golden core stage ghost cultivator fleeing. Going to the ghost village was a perfect fit for him. After another hour of walking, The gray mountains behind him had transformed into undulating ripples on the horizon. The roadside vegetation was becoming increasingly sparse, and the ground appeared dark and muddy. Looking into the distance, Zuo Chen spotted several dilapidated wooden fences among the trees on the earthen slopes. The dead village had arrived. He didn't rush in. First, he used the key observation technique recorded in the Taoist scriptures to pinpoint the dead village's location. In Zuo Chen's eyes, wisps of black key floated above the entire village. They didn't seem very large. Compared to his own foundation establishment key, they were like drops of water compared to a lake, or thatch compared to a giant tree. Very weak resentment, not yet powerful enough to be caused by ghost cultivators. It won't be dangerous to eliminate it easily. Feeling reassured, Zuo Chen walked into the village. Dead Slaughter Village was created by Chu Sun, the leader of the fragrance scent gang, using corpse incense. This place is now a malevolent and dangerous place. The Elder Bai Society invited you all here today, not to have you die in the village. Please be alert. A middle-aged man wearing a long gown and a small round hat looked at the martial arts practitioners before him with his hands behind his back. With his low shout, the martial arts practitioners, who had previously been relaxed, immediately became alert and ready for battle. They were all influential figures in the martial arts world, well known in the surrounding area. They had recently received a martial arts order from the Elder Bai Society, which was why they had gathered here. You tell them it's a ghost village, they're not afraid. Having roamed the martial world for so many years, they've seen their share of haunted villages. One person might not be able to handle it, but now, with over 10 heroes gathered, we can storm in and disperse any ghosts, no matter what they are. But when the manager of the Bai family said the village belonged to the Wangxiang gang, these martial artists were all terrified. The Wangxiang gang was the #1 evil gang in Qingzhou City. Their methods of summoning spirits with candles were unpredictable and impossible to defend against. There was even a rumor circulating in the city, if you offer incense at midnight, you'll meet the king of hell at dawn. This shows how sinister the Wangxiang gang's incense offerings were. Manager Han. Won't we be hunted down by the Wangxiang gang if we go in? A sturdy-looking man among the martial artists asked. The manager sneered. Hunt down? The Wangxiang gang may be powerful, but weren't they still driven out of Qingzhou City by our Bai family? Even if they dare to come, they won't be able to find you. At most, they'll come after our Bai family. Hearing this, the wandering swordsman felt somewhat relieved. Just then, a bright, cheerful voice rang out from the crowd. Manager. Are there any treasures in the village? The manager's face darkened. Why were they already scheming about the village's treasures before even starting their work? A quick glance revealed a young girl among the crowd, red lips, white teeth, and a bright, intelligent face. Her little eyes darted around, full of mischievous charm. However, her attire wasn't exactly stellar. She looked more like a wandering swordsman than a commoner, and more like a peasant than a commoner. The manager initially didn't want to answer, but seeing the large group of swordsmen looking at him excitedly, he could only sigh. We haven't even gone in yet, so I don't know what treasures are inside. But such a sinister place should be able to produce a few good items. We'll see how you all fare then. Great. The girl's peach blossom eyes crinkled with laughter. After finishing their story, the steward counted the number of people. Including himself, there were 11. No problem. The group of martial arts heroes entered the village. At first, nothing seemed amiss. Looking into the village from the entrance, all they could see were a few broken planks and a dog skin hanging from a tree at the village entrance. But after taking a few more steps deeper, everyone suddenly felt a gust of cold wind, the swirling sand almost blinding them. When they could open their eyes again, they found the sky had become somewhat hazy. The martial arts heroes' expressions changed upon seeing this. It was midday. The sun had been shining brightly just moments before. How could the sky have suddenly turned overcast? The steward, however, remained calm. He produced a bamboo lantern from somewhere, then took out a tinderbox and lit it twice. Instantly, small green flames ignited inside the lantern, dispelling the surrounding darkness. The martial arts heroes' expressions softened somewhat. Gather together and slowly walk in. Chu soon left an incense stick in the village, made from corpse oil. As long as the incense is there, the ghosts in the village won't disappear. Once you burn the incense, the ghosts will naturally be gone. After the steward finished speaking, the group of martial artists nodded, indicating that they understood. Old Zhao? Where's Old Zhao? Suddenly, Someone in the crowd called out in a panic, and the steward's brows furrowed. He counted the number of people again. 10 people. One was missing. The steward's heart sank. Damn it, one of them got lost as soon as we came in. Never mind him, let's keep going. Hearing the wailing and crying behind them, the steward turned around and cursed. Mourning attracts ghosts the most. Anyone who acts like this, I'll feed the whole village to them. Immediately, no one spoke. They continued forward, lantern in hand, and confirmed that nothing ghostly was happening again. The manager felt much more at ease. This mission wasn't difficult, it was simply a matter of using the popularity of the martial arts practitioners to reach the center of the village and remove the corpse-scented incense. Success would be a great achievement. Back in the city, he could be promoted from manager to hall master, his future bright. Risks? There were certainly risks, but not as great as imagined. If they couldn't win, they could run away, right? There were so many martial arts practitioners to take their place. As they walked, the little girl suddenly exclaimed, "Hey! Have we been to this place before?" Hearing the girl's voice, the manager immediately looked around. He immediately saw a tree not far away, with a dog skin hanging from it, trembling slightly in the wind. A ghost wall. The martial arts practitioners were already panicking, and even the manager forcibly suppressed his unease. "It's alright, I'll tie a red rope, and we can get out." The foreman spoke as he took out a red rope and walked to the broken wooden planks, intending to tie it on. However, just as he approached the planks, he suddenly noticed a figure behind them. He looked down and his forehead immediately broke out in a cold sweat. It was the missing martial arts master, Zuo Chen. He was sitting cross-legged on the ground, his head cradled in his arms, a smile on his face. "New book, please recommend and add to your collection." Chapter 4 Corpse Fragrance. The scene before them terrified all the martial artists around them. Having roamed the martial world for years, they had seen dead bodies before, but this corpse clutching its head and smiling was truly a first for them. Old Zhao. Old Zhao is dead. Old Zhao was possessed by a ghost and cut off his own head. If we stay in this ghost village, we'll end up like that too. I don't want to die. My wife is waiting for me in the city. One countryman, utterly terrified, ran out, his fork flying from his hand. The foreman didn't even have time to stop him before the man plunged into the darkness. A blood-curdling scream followed. Then, the sound abruptly stopped. The martial artists who had been thinking of fleeing all stopped in their tracks, their faces pale and filled with fear. Don't stray more than 3 feet from the light. The foreman finally found an opportunity. He immediately shouted at the people around him, ordering them to stay put. Only a large number of people can withstand the ghosts. Going in alone is certain death, the manager scolded the wandering warriors, tying a red rope to the wooden plank, one hand holding the rope, the other tied to his wrist. "We're being targeted by the village's unjustly deceased ghosts. If we don't die in their place, they can't leave. Don't even think about running out of the village now, the ghosts won't give way to us. If you want to live, hurry up and break the incense sticks with me." The wandering warriors forced themselves to stay together. The manager looked at the group around him, his anger rising. Although there weren't many capable people near King's House City, these few were supposed to be well known. But upon seeing them, hey! A bunch of useless trash. What a mess. Helpless, the manager could only walk at the front, the wandering warriors behind him forming a line. As he walked, he mustered his courage and loudly proclaimed, "The living must pass, ghosts must retreat. The living must pass, ghosts must retreat." His shout and a lantern in his hand dispelled the surrounding darkness, and the wandering swordsmen could finally make out their surroundings. The village was desolate, with abandoned houses on all sides, barely showing signs of past inhabitants. There was a large pit in the ground, covered with soil. It was unclear which kind-hearted corpse collector had collected their remains. Seeing their surroundings clearly, the swordsman's initial anxiety eased somewhat. Only the little girl in the crowd, after looking around, pulled out a yellow, fluffy-looking object from her hand, clutching it tightly with a serious expression. The group continued forward, and having made out a surrounding path, they soon reached the center of the not-so-large village. They finally saw an elm wood table in the very center of the village, with an incense burner on it, 3 sticks of incense burning slowly. The swordsmen were slightly startled. This ghost village has been around for almost 4 or 5 years. According to the manager, it was these 3 incense sticks that turned the village into a ghost village. Even after all this time, The 3 gray incense sticks are still burning. Tiny flames hang above the 3 sticks, white smoke rising upwards. The scent-smelling gang's methods are indeed mysterious and miraculous. These are the 3 incense sticks. Break them, and the resentment in the village will dissipate, the manager shouted immediately. Hearing his words, the martial artists exchanged bewildered glances. One bold young man stepped forward and walked directly towards the incense. I'll do it. Before he finished speaking, the young man was already beside the elmwood table. He raised his large hand, aiming at the incense. But to everyone's surprise, his movements froze. He seemed to be staring at the incense, his eyes wide, bloodshot, veins bulging on his forehead, yet his hand couldn't even touch the incense. What's wrong? The foreman immediately asked, his voice tense. It's nothing. The young man's voice suddenly came. He didn't move his body, but his head began to slowly turn backward. Until it was completely turned 180 degrees, the young man's neck made a painful cracking sound. He had a smile on his face, but blood began to flow from the corner of his mouth and his eyes. I'm fine, foreman, come quickly, I broke the incense stick. The 3 incense sticks are still intact, there's no sign of them being broken. This bizarre scene finally shattered the psychological defenses of all the martial artists. Someone in the crowd screamed, and then everyone scattered like crows, running in all directions. This time, the manager didn't even have time to stop them before suddenly feeling darkness descend upon him from all sides, and the lantern in his hand went out instantly. In a short moment, only the little girl and the bald man who hadn't spoken a word remained around the manager. Seeing the oppressive darkness, the little girl's face turned pale with fright. Several pairs of almost pure white hands reached out from the darkness behind her, grabbing at her limbs. Good heavens! Ghosts are grabbing people. The little girl was terrified. She immediately threw the yellow ball in her hand away, and she vanished like a phantom. In an instant, several ghostly hands grabbed not the little girl, but the yellow cotton ball. The foreman's expression changed several times. He had thought that by using the people's energy to burn incense, he could easily complete the task, but he hadn't expected them to be so weak. Gritting his teeth and stamping his foot, he took out a gourd from his pocket and wielded the rope like a meteor hammer, smashing away wave after wave of ghosts. However, he was unexpectedly hit by a fleeing martial artist, which snapped the rope. Seeing the gourd fly into the darkness, the foreman was dumbfounded. In the end, he could only shout on the spot, "Damn you!" The bald man remained calm. He took out a package wrapped in red cloth from his pocket, tore off the red cloth, and revealed a precious sword inside. How much silver will it cost to take you out? Any amount you want. The foreman, consumed by rage, lost his composure. He knew he couldn't escape on his own. If someone was willing to take him out, he didn't care about the money. I have silver too. Take me out, and I'll give you some, the little girl immediately cried out. She still had 3 balls left, one of which was emitting black smoke and was about to dissolve into a puddle. The foreman and the man could see that without the ball, her life-saving method was gone. All right, follow me, the bald man, knife in hand, walked ahead, the 2 men following cautiously behind. With each step, howls and wails echoed around them. The bald man glared, cursing, and swung his knife. You son of a bitch. Your howls are making me nervous. With a single stroke, a scream echoed from the darkness as a semi-transparent woman's head was severed. The steward's eyes widened. This was a butcher's knife. The butcher's knife exuded a chilling aura, deterring even ghosts and monsters from approaching. This bald man seemed to be a master swordsman, wielding the butcher's knife with remarkable ease. There was hope. They could fight their way out. The steward quickly followed. The 3 walked along the dirt path, each step followed by the bald man swinging his knife into the air. Each swing was accompanied by screams. The further they went, the faster the man swung his knife, and beads of sweat began to appear on his forehead. More troublesome than I thought, the man hadn't expected to break the incense left by the leader of the fragrance gang. After all, the difference in strength between the 2 sides was too great. The White Elder Society had mobilized almost half of its members to drive the fragrance gang out of King's How. How could a few of them possibly destroy someone else's treasure? But rescuing them would make earning that emergency money much easier. He'd been to this village before, though dangerous, he'd managed to fight his way out. But today, the ghosts in the village seemed a bit agitated. Could it be because they'd gotten close to the incense? If all else fails, I'll just leave these 2 here. The man's heart skipped a beat, and he quickened his pace, intending to break out alone. But before he'd taken 2 steps, a huge ghostly figure suddenly appeared before him. It was a woman, dressed in a bright red wedding gown, her face indistinct, but emanating a palpable aura of resentment. The bald man's heart trembled violently, and he instinctively swung his sword, but the blow missed the woman. He only felt the blade curve around, then instantly slashed towards his own neck. In the eyes of the shopkeeper and the young girl, the bald man suddenly reversed his blade, instantly slitting his own throat. Blood spurted out, and both their faces turned deathly pale. A vengeful ghost in red. This village actually harbors such a powerful evil entity. The foreman, his spirit adrift, suddenly screamed, shoved the girl beside him, and vanished into the village in the blink of an eye. The girl, caught off guard by the foreman's sudden act of using her as a shield, couldn't dodge in time and found herself face to face with a red-clad bride. 2.5 of the 3 balls in her hand instantly exploded, and the remaining yellow cotton ball disappeared at a visible speed. The girl turned pale, wanting to run away, but found all her joints rusted shut, unable to move an inch. It's over. She'd only come to the village to retrieve some treasures, but instead, she was going to be killed by a vengeful ghost. The bride slowly extended 2 fingers towards her eyes, and the girl couldn't even close them. She could only watch helplessly as the blood-red fingernails drew closer and closer to her eyes. Suddenly, a thunderclap exploded from the ground. The red-clad ghost didn't even have time to react before she was blown apart from her back to her chest. Without a single scream, it vanished instantly, turning to ashes. The pitch-black darkness surrounding them was abruptly torn apart by this thunderclap, transforming into a clear blue sky in an instant. A sliver of afternoon light filtered through the thick and thin clouds, casting uneven shadows across the village. A Taoist priest carrying a bamboo basket slowly withdrew his hand. "Are you alright?" he asked gently. Chapter 5 Cleansing the Turbid. Zuo Chen withdrew his hand. The black energy that had been clinging to his palm melted away quickly, like spring snow, under the scorching heat of the pure white lightning. He looked at the turbid energy in his palm, slightly surprised. In Zuo Chen's opinion, the turbid energy of the entire village was less than a finger's width of his own, yet it had festered with so many harmful spirits. Could such a small amount of turbid energy really produce ghosts? The cultivation world is prone to breeding evil things. When he arrived, he found 5 or 6 Jianghu men already dead on the road, and another was in the process of dying. The bald man had a wisp of turbid energy clinging to him, his eyes were red, and he was wielding a knife, slashing at himself. When he saw Zuo Chen, he started hacking at him. He was covered in wounds, and some of his internal organs were even exposed, a scene straight out of a horror movie. Zuo Chen directly blew away the turbid energy on him, then grabbed a handful of mud from the ground and filled it into his wounds. He took out a talisman from his bamboo basket and stuck it on them, and the man came back to life, though still unconscious. After finishing all this, Zuo Chen quickly walked towards the center of the village, just in time to see the red-clad ghost reach out towards the little girl, poking her eye. Then came the scene from before. The ghost withdrew its hand, completely dissipating, leaving only the little girl, clutching half a yellow ball, dumbfounded. The little girl pointed at the vanished ghost, then at Zuo Chen, stammering, "You? This? Me? What kind of skill is this?" The ghost from before was incredibly thin, only half a stick shorter than the 3 incense sticks in the center of the village. It was clearly the girl the village leader had mentioned who had ruined the entire village. Yet this young Taoist priest, who looked no more than 20, shattered it with a single slap. Even the man with a butcher's knife didn't have this skill. The little girl swallowed hard. She had encountered a master. "Who are you? Why are you in this village?" Zuo Chen asked, slightly puzzled, wondering why an ordinary person would come to this eerie place. "My name is Kie. I was hired by the Bai family to deal with this ghost village. Something went wrong just now. If it weren't for you, Taoist master, I'd probably be dead." Kie patted her chest, let out a long sigh, and then followed behind Zuo Chen with a sheepish smile, pinching the hem of his clothes with her thumb and forefinger. "Taoist master, could you take me away? I'm not very capable, I'll surely die here alone. You can't just leave me to die. If you want money, we have money. If you're after your beauty." The girl blinked. "I know an alley, I can lead you there." Zuo Chen chuckled. This girl looked pretty and innocent, but her mouth had a roguish tone. He wondered where she learned it from. "Just follow me," Zuo Chen said. Kie was overjoyed. Just as the two were about to leave, Kie suddenly noticed a hairpin on the ground. It seemed to have fallen from the red-clothed ghost earlier. Kai stared at it, drool dripping down her face. This was a treasure born from a vengeful ghost, who knew what kind of supernatural powers it might possess. Of course, Kai didn't dare to take it directly. She could only watch helplessly as Zuo Chen picked up the hairpin from the ground and held it in his hand. Even ghosts can drop such evil things. A flash of lightning appeared in Zuo Chen's hand, and the hairpin instantly turned to ashes and disappeared. Kai? No way? Why did you just destroy the treasure? Even if you didn't sell it in the city, you could still get several hundred taels of silver from it. Kai felt her heart bleeding. Zuo Chen didn't know what Kai was thinking. Seeing her strange expression, he asked curiously, "What's wrong?" "Nothing, nothing." Kai's lips twitched slightly. Continuing to walk into the village, Kai didn't dare to walk alone, cautiously following behind Zuo Chen like a cat. After walking a few steps along the village path, Kai suddenly felt that the scenery around her looked familiar. Mustering her courage, she peeked out from behind Zuo Chen and looked outside. The elm wood table in the middle of the village and the 3 incense sticks on it made Kai's face turn green. She felt as if her soul had almost flown out of her body. Taoist master. What are you doing here? Kai stammered. Why was this Taoist master here to court death? More than 10 of them hadn't been able to hold on, and now only the Taoist master could manage. Her gaze swept over the table, and Kai suddenly noticed that the young man behind the table, his neck twisted at a 90-degree angle, was still standing there. He was bleeding from all 7 orifices, his appearance terrifying, yet his body could still move backwards, a monster that looked like it had crawled out of a graveyard. My God! Kai shuddered, her face turning green and white. Zuo Chen suddenly took a step forward, and before Kai could react, he was already beside the young man. He reached out and pressed his hand directly onto the young man's head, then twisted it. Crack! The young man's head was twisted back into its original position. The young man seemed dazed, staggered a couple of times, and then collapsed to the ground with a thud, unconscious. Zuo Chen withdrew his hand and nodded in satisfaction. He couldn't save someone who was already dead, but for someone who wasn't dead, he could heal their external injuries and then channel some innate true ki to save their life. His move made Kai's eyes widen. She had only ever seen ghosts twist people's heads off, but she had never seen a living person's head twist back. Of course, Kai didn't know that the young man on the ground was alive. She thought that the Taoist priest had just acted decisively and instantly dealt with the unfortunate soul who was beyond saving. Zuo Chen finally turned his attention to the 3 incense sticks on the table. In his eyes, wisps of black ki were slowly rising from the 3 incense sticks, seemingly slightly denser than the resentment in the village. But to Zuo Chen, it was nothing more than a wisp of smoke from a tinderbox. He had never seen such a strange technique before, nor did he need to with his abundant spiritual energy. With a casual slap, the entire table and incense burner were split in 2, ash scattered on the ground, quickly igniting. A faint scream seemed to echo in the air, then abruptly ceased. As Kai saw it, a gentle breeze seemed to suddenly sweep through the village, dispelling her anxiety and the surrounding gloom. The dark clouds dispersed, and the blue sky returned. The dilapidated houses and tombstones in the deserted village were covered in moss, yet insects and birds chirped, the once silent wasteland now undistinguishable from a roadside pine tree and stream. Only the dogskin hanging at the village entrance, silently telling the story of what had happened there. Zuo Chen withdrew his hand and shook his wrist. He had just felt resistance. A very, very weak resistance. This incense burner, did it still have an owner? Kai swallowed hard, her eyes growing brighter. With such skill, if she could learn even a move from him, wouldn't she be able to roam freely in King's House City? Just as she was about to fawn over Zuo Chen, Kai suddenly noticed the young man Zuo Chen had just dragged back had been slapped. He got up from the ground. Oops, what happened to me? Kai? Holy crap. Outside King's House City was a small town, deathly still. The townspeople, after finishing their work in the fields, would immediately return home and obediently light 3 incense sticks. If anyone forgot this, a new person would move into their house the next day, and the original townspeople would disappear without a trace. In the center of the town was a temple. Inside, a young man with delicate features and 2 red dots painted at the corners of his eyes stood beside him, surrounded by incense burners, each containing 3 incense sticks. Suddenly, a crisp sound rang out from the incense burner in front of him. Crack! It split open. The young man slowly opened his eyes, a look of confusion on his face. Has someone broken the scent of my corpse? Chapter 6 King's Hao Beishao Lake. Thank you so much for saving us. Thank you so much for saving us. The bald man with the knife and the young man whose neck had been twisted hurriedly thanked Zuo Chen. Zuo Chen simply waved his hand and said, "No need to be so polite." These two were just mortals, lacking ability and skill, so saving them didn't require much effort. Their depleted spiritual energy could be restored in the time it takes to burn an incense stick. If it could save their lives, it was certainly worth it. Originally, the two wanted to give Zuo Chen some reward, but the young man from the village was already extremely poor. He had only come to do this job because he was strong and wanted to beg for food. Helpless, the young man could only promise that if there was anything he could do in the future, he would do it even if it meant going through fire and water. The man with the knife had nothing of value on him right now. The only valuable thing he had was the butcher's knife in his hand, but Zuo Chen didn't even look at it. I'm already at the foundation establishment stage, what use is a butcher's knife to me? The palm-sized thunderbolt was still the best. Seeing that Zuo Chen didn't like his knife, the man promised to return to the city early to collect the silver. My family is with his Hangzhou escort agency in Kingzhou City. Please do me the honor of visiting my home. I'll prepare fine wine and food for you as a token of my gratitude for saving me. Seeing the man's sincere words, Zuo Chen felt it would be impolite to refuse, so he nodded in agreement. The young man glanced at Zuo Chen a few more times, seemingly wanting to say something, but ultimately remained silent. Afterwards, the two martial artists left, leaving only Kai following behind. Miss Kai, is there anything else? Zuo Chen asked, a little puzzled by the girl's constant presence. Master, you saved my life, and I still don't know your name. Kai scratched her head, slightly embarrassed. My surname is Zuo, and my given name is Chen. I'm just a humble Taoist. A humble Taoist? Could a mere Taoist priest really shatter the corpse incense of the evil one in Kingzhou with a single slap? Kai felt that the two of them might have slightly different definitions of a Taoist priest. Composing herself, Kai began rubbing her hands together. Master Zuo, you're from outside Kingzhou, aren't you? Kingzhou is quite a place. You need someone to guide you to eat, drink, and have fun. You saved my life, but I don't have much money, and you probably wouldn't even look at these things I have. How about I show you around Kingzhou? You don't have to worry about where you want to go, I can find it for you. Zuo Chen chuckled. This girl certainly talked a lot. However, Zuo Chen did need a local to explain the current situation to him, so he nodded. Upon hearing this, Kai grinned foolishly and eagerly led the way, taking Zuo Chen towards Kingzhou. Master Zuo, where did you come from? I haven't heard of any Taoist temples near Kingzhou, let alone a Taoist as skilled as you. I came down from Grey Mountain to learn some skills. You want to learn skills? Kai was astonished. I've been learning magic tricks for almost 10 years, and I'm still not as good as your slap. There probably aren't many people in the entire Kingzhou city who can teach you. Kai wasn't bragging. She was quite talented, and her 10 years of magic tricks surpassed most martial artists. There weren't many people in Kingzhou who could reliably defeat her. Old Master Bai must be better than me, right? Zuo Chen asked curiously. He'd heard from the village chief that Kingzhou was now a fairly large city. In the cultivation world, a gang in such a large city should at least have a golden core cultivator to command respect. The elders in the Bai Lao society and Elder Bai himself are indeed powerful, but they specialize in retrieving corpses, which is a water-based art. It's quite different from your skills, Master Zuo. Huh? Zuo Chen was genuinely confused when he heard the words corpse retrieval. This corpse retrieval, is it the kind that involves pulling corpses out of rivers and lakes? That's it. Kai nodded. There's a large lake near Kingzhou called Beishao Lake. It's teeming with fish and is a major source of livelihood for Kingzhou. But the lake isn't peaceful. There's a river god there who creates huge waves every year if people don't offer incense, and small waves if they do. Because of this river god, many people have suffered. Families and relatives naturally want to bring their loved ones back, so some daring fishermen took up the profession of corpse retrieval. Over time, their business grew, and they somehow acquired water cultivation techniques. That's how the Bai Lao Society came about. Upon hearing Kai's introduction of the White Elder Society, Zuo Chen's expression became somewhat strange. He had initially assumed the White Elder Society was some kind of city organization that had inherited the cultivation methods of a major sect, possessing techniques like the white-haired old man's skill. However, after hearing Kai's description, he realized that the White Elder Society's way of making a living was far more down-to-earth than he had imagined. A group of corpse retrievers possessing supernatural powers? What kind of supernatural powers could they possibly have? Making corpses leap out of the water by themselves? Moreover, it sounded like the White Elder Society relied on the river god of the Great Lake for survival. This river god sounded like a demon. A golden core cultivator? He'd use the key observation technique to steal a glance at the Great Lake later. If it really was a powerful demon at the golden core stage, he'd better escape as soon as possible. Such a demon, who harmed people at the drop of a hat, might not be so friendly to other cultivators. What if the river god invited him to a gathering in its water palace? That would be troublesome. The two followed a winding path for half an hour until they reached a hillside. Looking down from the hillside, Zuo Chen immediately spotted a lake in the distance. It was vast, stretching as far as the eye could see, shimmering in the sunlight. A city stood on the lake's edge, like a broken stone carelessly tossed aside. That must be Baisha Lake. Following the direction of Kai's finger, Zuo Chen looked towards Baisha Lake. Wisps of black mist seemed to be rising and swirling across the lake, enveloping the entire Qingzhou city. He blinked. The black mist in the lake didn't seem to be that much. Qingzhou city was built along the lake, with some rivers flowing into the city, separating the tiled and wooden houses, connected by small stone bridges. Half the city's inhabitants relied on the lake for their livelihood, and the other half depended on those who relied on the lake for theirs. The Bailao Wei, Old White Society, belonged to the latter half. They wielded considerable power in the city. Even the local government had to treat those from the Bailao Wei with utmost respect. In the city, there was a large mansion, bustling with people, all high-ranking members of the Bailao Wei. At this moment, the mansion was in a state of constant activity, with people entering and leaving, a chaotic scene. Manager Liu is dead? Inside the mansion, a short man frowned, staring at the messenger before him. Yes, I was watching the longevity lock, and suddenly it broke. As expected, the methods Chu soon left behind aren't so easy to solve. The man sighed softly. Let's put the ghost village matter aside for now. The priority is to appease the river god. Serving the river god well is more important than anything else. As long as the river god stands behind our Bailao society, no matter what, the Wangxiang gang can't touch us. Chapter 7 Sacrificing to the River God. The waters near Yinchuan are perfect for rowing. The bridges like those of Luoyuan are ideal for riding a fine horse. Watching the waves washes away all worries and clamor. The prayers for a good harvest are frequently heard during the 8 sacrifices ceremony. Since the vast waves filled the Jade Pass, every year the bells and drums resound in the new palace, offering the 3 sacrificial animals. Su Fuge, the head of the Bailao Wei, White Elders Association, was a short man, but his shouts were surprisingly imposing. Using some unknown technique, his long shout sounded like the mooing of a bull. Everyone in the vicinity, from the Bailao Wei's members to the laborers who had chipped in for a few coins, could hear it and immediately get to work. In no time, several laborers brought out an 8 immortal table, placed an incense burner on it, and neatly arranged the heads of a cow, sheep, and pig on a red cloth. They tore off a small piece of red cloth, covered the eyes of the 3 sacrificial animals, and tied a knot at the top of their heads. Having prepared the offerings, Su Fuge nodded in satisfaction. He walked to the altar, but his gaze didn't immediately fall on the lake. Instead, it traveled towards the opposite shore. Su Fuge had amazing eyesight. He immediately spotted another altar on the other side of the lake. The altar was also extremely high, with sacrificial offerings placed on top. Unlike the Bailao Wei's altar, the Wangxiang gang's altar had numerous incense burners, each filled with incense sticks. These Wangxiang gang bastards were trying to steal the river god's offerings again. This wasn't the first time the 2 gangs had clashed over this. Almost every year they fought over the river god's offerings. In recent years, the Bailao Wei had won, driving the Wangxiang gang out of Qingzhou. Chu Sun of the Wangxiang gang naturally harbored resentment, trying to challenge the Bailao Wei every year, only to fail each time. This year, however, was different. Chu Sun had encountered a highly skilled person outside the city, someone with great abilities, even able to converse with a river god. This presented Chu Sun with a rare opportunity. his only chance to invite the Bailao way out of King's Hao City. Su Fuga didn't know what opportunity the master had secured for Chu soon, he could only deal with it as it came. Composing himself, he sensed something in the lake watching him, a chill creeping over him. He hurriedly bowed, but suddenly heard a deep male voice coming from the river. Listening intently, Su Fuga's expression grew increasingly strange. Soon, noon passed, and Su Fuga stepped down from the altar. Someone immediately approached him. "Master, what does the river god want this time?" 3 days from now, he wants a boy and a girl," Su Fuga replied. The people below exchanged bewildered glances. After a long pause, a young man cautiously asked, "That's not much different from before. Can't we just grab some from the street? You don't know anything." Su Fuga, his beard bristling and eyes wide, cursed the young man. What they want this year is different from what they wanted in previous years. That old bastard Chusun definitely has a backup plan. You guys go investigate what kind of virgin boys the Fragrance Scent Gang has prepared, and what kind of virgin girls they've captured. If you don't find any clues within 3 days, you can all jump into the river and serve the river god." Hearing this, his subordinates turned pale with fright and immediately ran away. Only Su Fuga remained, muttering to himself, "Virgin boys and girls? Only virgin boys and girls. This is King's Hao City. If Master Zuo wants to find the White Elder Society, just walk along the main street. If you want to find a place to stay, I know a place that will make you comfortable." Kie smiled and introduced the city to Zuo Chen, who couldn't help but gaze at the large lake not far away. "I see quite a few people in the lake now, is something wrong?" Kie also looked in that direction, and after spotting the 2 sacrificial platforms, she chuckled twice. It must be the Bai Elder Society and the Wangxiang Gang offering sacrifices to the river god. They do this every year, offering 3 kinds of sacrificial animals and praying for the river god's protection. Zuo Chen's expression became even more strange. Such a weak river god could protect a region? He hadn't seen clearly on the mountain because of the strong wind, but after entering the city, Zuo Chen was completely certain. The river god in the lake probably hadn't even reached the key refining stage. The entire lake exuded a yin aura from within, suggesting that this river god had probably cultivated through some shady means, yet 2 gangs in the city were offering sacrifices to him. Was the local power in King's Hao City really that weak? Zuo Chen wondered if he might have misjudged the strength of the cultivation world below the mountain. "Master Zuo? What's wrong?" "Nothing." Zuo Chen suppressed all the chaotic thoughts in his mind. There might be some hidden story behind this. He still needed to go to the other side of the lake first. However, he couldn't bring ordinary people with him on this mission. "Miss Kie, now that we're in the city, I can find my way around by myself. Shall we part ways here?" Zuo Chen said to Kie. But Kie's expression changed slightly upon hearing this. "Eh? Master Zuo, there are many delicious and fun things to do in King's Hao City. I haven't had a chance to introduce them to you yet. I didn't come to King's Hao City for leisure." Zuo Chen shook his head slightly, then looked at Kie with a half-smile. "Miss Kie, just say what you want to say. I don't understand such roundabout ways." A blush instantly appeared on Kie's cheeks. She was quite embarrassed after her thoughts were exposed. She twirled her index fingers together, half raising her eyes to look at Zuo Chen shyly. You saved our lives, we want to show our respect." "There's really no need for that. Don't you have any family in King's Hao? Is it really okay for you to come with me around like this?" "Sigh, I'm an orphan, I don't have any family." Kie was slightly embarrassed. "I've been learning magic tricks since I was a child, and I've made a good living in the city by performing magic tricks with my skillful hands, but I'm also all alone. If I were to pack my bags, they probably wouldn't even be as full as the things in your bamboo basket, Master Zuo. You can leave whenever you want. You don't need to worry about me. You really want to come with me?" "Yes. But why should I take you with me? I can wash clothes. My clothes are durable, I don't need to wash them." Zuo Chen was actually being modest. He was now completely free of dust, and his clothes were more than just durable. I can earn money by performing. I should have better ways to earn money." Kie's face fell, and after a long while, she stammered out. I can help with some chores?" Zuo Chen stared at her for a couple more times, a glint of light flashing in his eyes. No murderous aura, so she probably hasn't killed anyone. With Xiaofu, she might have done some good deeds in the past. Let me make this clear first. If anything happens to you while you're with me, don't blame me. Of course. Kie nodded repeatedly. This Taoist priest's methods are strong enough. She's not much better off living in King's House City than clinging to a powerful figure. These days, having a powerful backer is much more useful than being powerful yourself. The two quickly arrived at the riverbank. Looking out, there were still some scattered shadows on the lake, probably fishermen's boats, but there weren't many of them. Reaching a boatman on the shore, Zuo Chen asked, "Boatman, I'd like to rent your boat for half a day. How much silver would that cost?" "Half a day?" The boatman sized Zuo Chen up and down. 3 jin of silver is a deposit. You'll get 2 jin plus half a string of copper coins back when you return. Kie was faster than Zuo Chen, taking out 3 jin of silver and placing it in the boatman's hand. After receiving the silver, the boatman gave Zuo Chen, the Taoist priest, a strange look and added a few more words of advice. "Be careful after you set sail. The river god doesn't like boats lingering on his lap. He moves them every half hour. I can rent this boat for 2 hours. Except for the extremely unlucky ones, the river god will be lenient and release them." "Thank you for the reminder, boatman." Zuo Chen boarded the boat, and Kie hesitated for a moment before following suit. Dragging the oars, Zuo Chen slowly propelled the small boat towards the center of the lake. Once in the center, Zuo Chen sat cross-legged on the boat. "Master Zuo, what are we doing here?" Kie didn't know what Zuo Chen wanted to do, but she felt he seemed to be plotting something big. "Me?" Zuo Chen said with a smile, "I'm fishing for the river god." Kie? If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8 Fishing for the River God. Zuo Chen began baiting the hook. Before his transmigration, he quite enjoyed fishing, spending a whole day by the river with a cup of tea and a pack of cigarettes. He just hadn't expected to catch a fish again after transmigrating, and a big one at that. Of course, his equipment couldn't compare to the expensive treasures he'd acquired in his previous life. The fishing rod was bamboo, the fishing line was made of a material he didn't recognize, and there were no bait balls for ground baiting. He figured the owner of this boat probably used a large fishing net from the cabin, not a rod. But it didn't matter, Zuo Chen had his own clever methods for baiting. Just as Zuo Chen was preparing, Kie beside him trembled. "Master Zuo? Who are you trying to catch?" "The river god." "Didn't I just say so?" "Master Zuo. The river god is the deity worshipped at the largest temple in King's Hao. Even if you want to see him, you shouldn't be using a fishing rod." Kie's voice was trembling with tears. Zuo Chen blinked, looking at Kie with some confusion. "I wanted to ask before coming here, is there not a single golden core cultivator in the entire King's House City? Are you just letting the lake demons cause trouble? Or is this river god actually a pet fish kept by some powerful being?" Kie looked at Zuo Chen with clear but foolish eyes. "Master? What is a golden core?" "Well, I'll just have to catch this river god and ask him before making a decision." He channeled his inner ki into the bamboo rod, which slowly extended upwards and landed on the fishing line. At this moment, the sky was half setting with the sun. Under the gentle light and the aura of Zuo Chen, the entire fishing line shimmered with a pale golden glow, as if woven from the finest gold thread. What to use as bait? The spiritual energy cultivated by Zuo Chen was the best bait material. The Taoist scripture in his hand recorded that animals need to accumulate spiritual energy on their own, taking a span of hundreds of years before they could possibly transform into humans, demons, or spirits. For animals, the yang fire of the sun's spiritual energy was too intense, and most demons couldn't withstand it. The moon's spiritual energy was gentle and could be absorbed, but its efficiency was too low. The true spiritual energy or innate true energy, refined within a human's body, became the most quickly absorbed treasure for demons. This is why many evil creatures prefer to devour young boys and girls. The flesh of 2 humans is less than enough to fill a tooth gap. The true essence in the danshan is the real treasure. A wisp of spiritual energy emanated from the fishing line, which seemed to be stretched by an external force, appearing as a golden thread sinking towards the depths of the lake. The fishing line remained still, so Zuo Chen wasn't in a hurry and remained seated in the small boat. Kie was terrified, clinging tightly to the frame of the wooden boat, seemingly afraid that a sudden wave would knock her off. After waiting for what felt like an eternity, and seeing that nothing had happened, Kie cautiously released her grip from the frame. She cautiously approached Zuo Chen, forcing a smile as she spoke. Master Zuo, we haven't seen any fish all day. Should we go back? I know you're very capable, but isn't this a bit dangerous? Miss Kie, you like to chat when you're nervous. Hearing Zuo Chen's teasing, Kie exploded. Master Zuo, it's not that I like to chat. The temple priests are all capable. They all possess some kind of supernatural power. Our river god is even more outstanding, quite remarkable in the entire Dalian. You say you want to catch it? You. She rambled on for a while, then finally paused, cautiously looking at Zuo Chen. Master, can you defeat the river god? Should? Such a life or death situation, and you say should. Even if you can protect yourself, you have me with you. I'm not very capable. Before Kie could finish speaking, she suddenly felt a boat beneath her swaying. She let out a strange quack, clinging to the frame with all four limbs, desperately trying to stay afloat. Zuo Chen sat calmly on the boat, his eyes brimming with spiritual energy. He clearly saw a large, azure fish chasing the hook and leaping upwards beneath the boat. The black mist in the lake and the black mist on the fish seemed perfectly identical. This must be the river god. It's taking the bait. Near the small boat, the sun had been shining brightly, half the sky tinged with crimson, but with the appearance of the azure fish, thick black clouds appeared out of nowhere, obscuring half the sky and blocking the last rays of the setting sun. From the center of the lake, a sinister wind arose, rippling the water, swaying the boat, and causing it to rattle and creak as if struggling against a tremendous external force. Accompanying the commotion was Kie's terrified scream, "The boat's going to break apart! Help! Help! Help!" Kie was almost crying, her legs trembling, but Zuo Chen simply held down the fishing rod, as steady as a mountain. He wasn't in a hurry to reel in the fish, but rather felt the force transmitted through the fishing rod. It wasn't too strong, and it didn't seem like the fish possessed any special skill. Only this fish was struggling fiercely, and the fishing rod in Zuo Chen's hand was just an ordinary object. Pulling it up too forcefully would easily break it. He'd have to pay the shopkeeper money then, which wasn't worthwhile. A flash of lightning appeared in Zuo Chen's hand, and the lightning magic in his palm traveled directly up the fishing rod, reaching its peak before shooting down the fishing line into the water, disappearing into the lake in the blink of an eye. Crack! A muffled thunderclap sounded, followed by a flash of blue light. The demonic wind suddenly stopped, and the dark clouds in the sky dispersed with the wind. The lake's surface returned to the glow of the setting sun, as if everything that had just happened was merely an illusion, as if nothing had occurred. It was already late, and the fishermen, who were about to return home, suddenly noticed a flash of blue light on the lake. Several fish then flipped over and floated downstream, their gills still moving, as if they had fainted. The fishermen looked around but couldn't find the source. They could only kneel on their boats and kowtow twice towards the center of the lake, believing it was a sign of mercy from the river god. In the very center of the lake, Kie could feel the surrounding waves gradually calming down. She cautiously opened her tightly closed eyes and discovered that the ominous scene had dissipated. Looking around, Kie saw Zuo Chen carrying a fish basket from his boat. Inside the basket was a plump, fat crucian carp, thrashing about. This fish seemed quite strong. It swayed back and forth in the basket as if trying to tear it apart. Kie could even see a truly ferocious look in the fish's eyes. What is this? The river god. Zuo Chen reached out and patted the basket, and the fish immediately quieted down. The initial ferocity instantly transformed into fear. The fish circled around a few more times before finally raising its head, looking at Zuo Chen with a resigned expression. "My lord, spare my life." Chapter 9 Killing the River God. Zuo Chen stared at the large fish in the basket, noticing the wisps of black energy, which were indeed much denser than in the ghost village. However, it was far from being a significant force. The Qi refining stage involves drawing Qi into the body, creating a Qi sea within the Danshan, and then using this innate primordial Qi to connect with heaven and earth. This fish, currently sustained only by resentment, was far from reaching the basics of Qi refining. Logically, a demon of this level should only have just awakened its sentience, perhaps not even capable of taking human form yet, and shouldn't possess much power. How could it possibly be causing such a disturbance in King Zhao? I came here to fish for the river god. How did I catch such a little guy like you? Hearing Zuo Chen's chuckled words, the fish in the basket immediately cried out in unison, Yes, yes. I'm not the river god. I'm not the river god. You've caught the wrong fish. Please let me go back. Zuo Chen looked at the struggling fish and sighed softly. You're not the river god. What a pity. Then, he turned to Kai, who was staring in disbelief beside him. Do you have some liquor hidden over there? Liquor? Kai was still in shock at the Taoist priest catching the river god and hadn't yet realized what the Taoist priest was going to do. She just said blankly, I don't like to drink. If you want to have a drink, Taoist priest, I can buy some for you when we get back to shore. Perfect. We'll have fish soup tonight. Zuo Chen made a move to pick up the bamboo basket. This terrified the fathead crucian carp, who immediately screamed and begged for mercy. Great immortal, spare my life. I'm just a crucian carp in the river. I gained consciousness from eating too many corpses and was revered as a river god by the people by the lake. But I don't have any great abilities. My cultivation has been difficult. I beg you, great immortal, spare my life. Zuo Chen then stopped what he was doing and looked at the fathead crucian carp with a half smile. A river god who became a river god by eating corpses? You're quite capable. Is someone helping you cultivate? No, no. The fathead crucian carp was extremely embarrassed. If he had someone in charge, how could he have ended up in such a state? Mainly, he was quite capable. There weren't many people in the entire Dalian who could be considered as masters. Those were all extraordinary nobles. Who would bother coming to a small place like King's Hao? Could it be, this Taoist priest came to recruit subordinates? The fathead crucian carp instantly felt that he had realized the truth. Taoist master. If you need fish hands, I will serve you faithfully. If you tell me to go east, I will never go west. If you tell me to go up Grey Mountain, I will never go down White Lake. Hearing the fathead fish's pledge of loyalty, Zuo Chen felt a little strange. Really no master or backer? A demon that hasn't even reached the key refining stage can wreak havoc on the entire city? It's said that there are 4 realms in the cultivation world. Those stronger than him are called Senior Realm, those similar to him are called Fellow Taoist Realm, and those less powerful but with a background are called Junior Fellow Taoist Realm. So, this river god is the legendary 4th realm, the miscellaneous fish realm? Seeing that Zuo Chen was pondering and hadn't given a reply for a long time, the fathead fish became anxious. Taoist master. There are still many gold and silver treasures in my underwater palace at the bottom of this lake. If you need them, I can send them to you. If you don't need such mundane things, in 3 days a place called the Fragrance Scent Gang will offer me a golden boy and jade girl, which are a pair of treasures. I will present them to you then. Elder Bai will probably send me a pair of young boys and girls in a couple of days. They're a great tonic. I can prepare a special dish of albizia jaliberson for you in the water mansion to nourish your body. The fathead fish rambled on, and Zuo Chen was initially amused, until he heard about the young boys and girls and the albizia jaliberson, at which point a hint of coldness flashed in his eyes. Zuo Chen concealed this expression well, and the fathead fish didn't notice. What exactly is this albizia jaliberson you're talking about? Zuo Chen asked with a faint smile. Hearing that Zuo Chen was interested in his suggestion, the fathead fish immediately perked up. This albizia jaliberson is a delicious dish. It requires young boys and girls whose true essence hasn't dissipated. While ensuring their lives aren't destroyed, remove their bones, turn them into a pool of broth, and pour them down from the coral tree. The broth, simmered in the coral, tastes absolutely amazing. He described the dish in detail, explaining the entire process. The more Zuo Chen listened, the wider his smile became. Only after hearing these words did Zuo Chen sigh deeply. You're quite similar to me, a real gourmand. And what do you think? The fathead fish's eyes lit up with joy. Had he just played to his tastes? Unfortunately, I'm human, and I only eat the other 100 races, Zuo Chen said with a smile. Upon hearing this, the fathead fish was horrified. All the cultivators he knew were either raw meat and blood drinking, refining human pills, creating blood infants, or transforming livestock. There were plenty of them. How come he'd encountered a moral vanguard? Seeing that the Taoist priest before him had murderous intent, the fathead fish no longer waited obediently for death. Driven by malice, it mustered all its strength and leaped out of the fish basket. This time, the fathead fish was completely risking its life. Its scales began to rip downwards, its aim being to smash open the basket and escape into the river. The fish slammed violently into the bamboo fish basket. What was once a fragile mortal tree now felt like an incredibly hard rock. The impact was swift and sharp, leaving only a small hole in the basket. But that was enough for the fathead fish. It strained its body towards the opening, desperately trying to push its plump head out of the basket. If it could get back to the lake, even if it couldn't defeat the Taoist priest, it could at least escape. The Taoist priest couldn't possibly drain the entire Whitehead Lake just to capture it. But just as its head emerged, it suddenly saw a pair of large hands reaching for it. Within the palms, surging lightning flashed, like a massive dark cloud pressing down beneath the sky. The fathead fish felt its body shrink drastically within the lightning in the palm. Taoist priest, spare me. Its final, desperate cry escaped its throat, only to be swallowed by the thunder and the surging waves of the river. When Zuo Chen withdrew his hand, all that remained was a broken fish basket and a large, dead crucian carp. Kai leaned closer to the basket, cautiously peering inside. Only after confirming the river god was completely dead did she swallow hard. What was described as a battle between Master Zuo and the river god was actually Master Zuo interrogating the river god. The disaster at Beishao Lake in Kingshao was just killed with a single slap? Just who was Master Zuo? Zuo Chen looked at the broken bamboo basket and sighed softly. I'll have to compensate the fisherman later. He picked up the basket, intending to empty the dead fish, when Kai, quick as a flash, knelt beside Zuo Chen and hugged his leg. Master! This is a treasure. You can't throw it away. Zuo Chen stopped, both amused and exasperated. What treasure could this fish possibly be? Even if you don't throw it away, what do you want to do with it? I can eat it. Kai declared righteously. Zuo Chen? Chapter 10 River God Stewed Tofu. On the river, Zuo Chen steered the oar, while Kai clutched a tattered fish basket like a precious treasure, grinning foolishly. Didn't you just say you wanted a pot of liquor to go with the fish soup tonight? I'll buy you the best liquor when we get back. Have you thought this through? Zuo Chen glanced at Kai. This fish used to eat corpses. So what? Tigers eat people too. Even if a hero kills it, they still use the tiger bones to make wine. In this world, it's either eat or be eaten. It's just a matter of who wins. Kai still wouldn't let go of her treasure. As long as it doesn't eat its own kind, I'm fine with it. You're quite open-minded. It's not that I'm open-minded, it's just how the world is. They rowed to the shore, where fishermen gathered to collect their boats. Kai simply forgot the few coins she had and bought the entire fish basket. My fish basket isn't worth that much money. The fisherman hurriedly waved his hand, not wanting the extra money. Kai, however, fearing the fisherman would covet the fish in the basket, grabbed Zuo Chen and ran outside, leaving the fisherman standing there dumbfounded. Have these two never seen fish before? The fisherman recalled the crucian carp he'd seen in the tattered basket earlier. They were quite large, but nothing special. He caught one every 7 days. 2 or 3 coins? At the morning market, selling this kind of fish for 30 coins would get you called a cheat. The fisherman stopped thinking about these trivial matters. He couldn't refuse someone willing to pay a huge profit. On the way, Kai, carrying the fish, first bought a jug of wine, then hesitated between side dishes. Finally, Zuo Chen saw a girl selling tofu who hadn't closed up shop yet, and bought a piece of tofu for a few coins. It was already late, so Kai took Zuo Chen to her lodgings first. It was a small house on the outskirts of the city, next to a tributary leading into the city. It was damp after nightfall, so a stove needed to be lit in the center of the room. As the fire blazed, warmth filled the room, dispelling the dampness. Kai excitedly picked up a cleaver to scale the fish, but when she placed the crucian carp on the table and tried to scale it with the cleaver, sparks flew out instead of scales. After only 3 or 4 strokes, when Kai raised the cleaver again, the blade was jagged, with several nicks. Seeing Kai's dismayed face, Zuo Chen sighed helplessly, then got up, took the cleaver, channeled a portion of his spiritual energy into the blade, and quickly removed the scales, cut open the belly, and removed the entrails. Then he took out an iron pot from the room, scooped a full basin of water from the river, put the fish in, and threw in some tofu he had cut open. They simply started cooking, without adding any seasonings or oil. Zuo Chen, however, infused the broth with a wisp of spiritual energy to remove the black aura from the meat. Soon the water boiled, and the flesh of the big head carp melted rapidly into the broth, as if ice meeting fire. Even the fish bones dissolved into thick, white liquid that disappeared into the water. In the end, only a pot of white broth with tofu remained. Zuo Chen thought for a moment, then took a scallion he had grown on the mountain from his bamboo basket, chopped it, and added it to the broth. Kai immediately poured herself a bowl and then poured one for Zuo Chen, but Zuo Chen waved his hand and refused. "I prefer fish caught by fishermen." Kai didn't believe that ordinary fish caught by fishermen could be better than the river god's fish, so she happily ate the fish soup. After finishing a bowl of fish soup, Kai found it incredibly delicious. Her eyes narrowed into slits with happiness, and she smiled broadly. Kai quickly realized that the fish soup didn't fill her stomach, but instead transformed into a warm current that swept through her entire body. Overjoyed, she drank several more bowls. Feeling her body absorbing the heat, Kai felt a surge of happiness. Wouldn't this bowl of soup significantly boost her cultivation? Following a powerful figure really does bring good things. Seeing her drinking the soup, Zuo Chen, preoccupied with inquiring about the state of the world, asked, "Are there any government offices in King's House City?" "Government offices? They've been closed for ages." Kai shook her head. "The court is in utter chaos. All the officials who could have fled have fled. The one currently in charge of King's House is Prince Shou, one of the vassal kings, and he's not even in the city, he's quite far away." "I see." Zuo Chen nodded, remembering it. Zhao San rowed his boat, moving against a current along the stream in the city. As night fell and the sun began to set, Zhao San felt his life was slipping away with the sun. The guild leader had ordered him to investigate what the Wangxian gang was up to. He'd spent the whole day investigating, but found nothing. First, he sent some Jianghu Ji, a term referring to a kind of wandering spirit, men close to the gang, but they were all drowned. Then he scouted the area near the gang's territory, but he almost got discovered. Finally, he was forced to try and infiltrate the gang himself, only to be nearly beaten to death. The first day was a complete failure. Tomorrow was another day. If he still found nothing, he'd become one of the virgin boys and girls used in the sacrificial offerings. He didn't dare go into the alley to relieve himself. Before leaving, the guild leader had sealed several of his acupoints. If Zhao San dared to move even a little, he'd explode on the spot. Damn it, the Wangxian gang. Damn it, the river god. Despite his injuries, Zhao San rowed his boat past several boatmen, intending to return home, when he suddenly caught a whiff of something delicious. He instinctively sniffed, following the scent, and discovered a small house with an open side wall nearby. Inside, a young Taoist priest and a girl were drinking soup. The soup looked like it was made from leftover fish bones, with only a few pieces of tofu. It didn't look particularly appetizing, yet the aroma was incredibly tempting. Even Zhao San swallowed hard. But as a manager of the White Elders Society, he couldn't very well take food from an ordinary family. His attention was primarily drawn to the two women's appearances. Both had full, radiant foreheads and beautiful features. The young Taoist priest and the girl both had rosy lips and white teeth. Unlike the dark, rough skin of fishermen, they seemed like a perfect pair. If he couldn't find any information about the fragrance scent gang, he needed to find some attractive offerings, and this young Taoist priest and girl seemed perfect. The prerequisite was that these two hadn't yet enjoyed each other's bodies in bed. So he rowed over. "Hey folks, having some soup?" Zhao San appeared, rowing his boat, and Kai, who was drinking soup, was visibly startled. She quickly covered the large pot in front of her with both hands, protecting her soup like a mother hen protecting her chicks. Seeing Kai's behavior, a hint of disdain flashed in Zhao San's eyes. "It's just a pot of soup, what's with the protectiveness?" Under the protection of the river god, their Bailao Wei eats plenty of fish and meat every day, much better than this fish soup. Of course, Zhao San didn't say these thoughts aloud. Instead, he smiled broadly and said, "Hey folks, I'm Zhao San, the manager of the Bailao Wei. Our Bailao Wei has a business opportunity that pays a lot of money. I wonder if you're interested?" "Pays money? What kind of business?" Kai's expression immediately changed completely, her face beaming with a fawning smile. "That's certainly a good business," Zhao San said with a smile. "However, before that, I have something I'd like to ask you to." "Go ahead. Are you two still virgins?" Upon hearing this, Zuo Chen glanced sideways at Zhao San. This Bailao Wei really intends to find young boys and girls to worship the river god. Chapter 11. What do you do for a living? Shopkeeper, is your business legitimate? Why do you ask if people are virgins right off the bat? Zuo Chen said with a beaming smile, showing no sign of anything amiss. Legitimate, of course legitimate. Taoist, You must be from out of town. Go ask around about the reputation of our Bailao way, we do all legitimate business. Zhao San laughed heartily. To be honest, I found you two because you're both good looking, like a perfect couple. What does that have to do with whether we're virgins or not? Zuo Chen asked. Our Bailao society is going to hold a river god worship ceremony soon, and we need a young boy and girl to preside over it. If you two are suitable, that would be perfect. A river god worship ceremony? Zuo Chen raised an eyebrow slightly. Aren't we going to be thrown into the river? How could that be? Zhao San shook his head. Just have you two change into new clothes and go to the riverbank to offer incense. That's all. That sounds good. Shall we go to the Bailao Society tomorrow? Sigh, why rush tomorrow? After you two finish eating, get on my boat. I'll take you there and arrange 2 superior rooms. The Bailao Society will definitely reward you handsomely after this is done. After saying that, Zhao San directly moored the boat to the side, his eyes fixed intently on the two of them. Taoist master, you're keeping an eye on us to prevent us from running away. Kie whispered. It's obvious he's got his eye on us. If we don't agree today, he might jump into the house and grab us. Kie scoffed. Isn't he afraid of grabbing 2 people who aren't virgins? Zuo Chen glanced at Kie. People have a special ability. You can tell from their faces whether their primordial yin and yang are still there. Since the Bai family sent him out to grab people, he must know how to read faces. Kie thought for a moment, then her face flushed red. She first covered her chest with her hands, then suddenly felt that this action was a bit strange, so she spread her palms out to cover her face. You can tell? I can tell at first glance. Kie's face turned red to her ears, but she finally spread her hands out and drank the fish soup bowl by bowl. After another incense stick's time, just as Zhao San was getting a little impatient, Kie finally finished the last of the fish soup in the iron pot. She licked her lips, but felt no fullness. Her blood surged through her body, causing a light sweat to bead on her forehead. You two have eaten enough, let's get on the boat. Zhao San called out, and the two boarded his small boat. With a push of the oar, the boat slowly moved forward along the stream in the city. The oars startled the young fish in the lake, and as the fry frantically thrashed their tails, swimming from the stream to the larger lake, Zhao San led Zuo Chen and the other to a large courtyard belonging to the Bailao Way. Zhao San jumped off the boat first, entered the courtyard, and called out, "Prepare the rooms." He then looked at Zuo Chen and the other, smiling broadly, "You two wait here for a moment, I'll go in and inform them, I'll be right back." He then hurried deeper into the house. The two were left in the courtyard. Kie looked around warily, seemingly afraid that a dozen or so burly men would suddenly appear and surround them. But then, remembering that the river god had already entered his stomach, his attitude immediately became arrogant again, adopting the air of a master of the house. A short while later, Zhao San brought over a short, sturdy man. The man looked Zuo Chen and Kie up and down before smiling. Little Sam said he'd found a wonderful couple, and they are indeed beautiful. I am Su Fuge, the president of the Bailao Association. You two will stay at our Bailao Association tonight. Just let us know if you need anything, Su Fuge said magnanimously. Thank you, President, Zuo Chen replied with a smile, then said, I do have something I'd like to ask you. Su Fuge's previously magnanimous expression changed slightly. He had only been polite, he hadn't expected the other party to actually have a request. What do you need? I sought the Dao on Grey Mountain before, but didn't learn many skills. I originally planned to go down the mountain and join the White Elder Society. Now, I only hope to learn a few tricks, Zuo Chen said. This wasn't a lie, at least before meeting the river god, this was indeed his plan. After hearing Zuo Chen's words, Su Fuge and Zhao San exchanged a glance. Want to learn some skills, huh? Normally, if Su Fuge heard a brooding young man say this to him, he would definitely slap him. After slapping him, he would make the other guy take a good look at himself and see what kind of monster he was, daring to covet the White Elder Society's skills. But now. Anyway, he was going to die the day after tomorrow, so teaching them a few skills today wouldn't hurt. Zhao San, don't you know a few water-based skills? Teach the young Taoist a thing or two. Su Fuge glanced at Zhao San. Zhao San pointed at himself. Me? Don't I have to look for clues about the fragrance gang tomorrow? But how could he dare disobey the leader? He could only grit his teeth and bear it. Su Fuge didn't linger there. He simply instructed the staff to prepare more chicken, duck, fish, and meet for a banquet to entertain the two of them tomorrow. After Su Fuga left, Zhao San gave Zuo Chen a rather resentful look. Zuo Chen pretended not to see it. Kie, however, lowered her voice and whispered in Zuo Chen's ear, "Taoist, you're already so skilled. Why do you still want to learn the methods of the Bailao way? Having more skills is never a burden. Actually, the main problem is that the Taoist scriptures don't record any other supernatural powers besides the Sinful Thunder Technique. Currently, Zuo Chen is relying entirely on the profound mysteries of innate spiritual energy to perform his techniques, but this method is too primitive, and even Zuo Chen himself feels something is wrong. Taoist techniques should be profound and wondrous, not like what I'm doing, just brute force with my palm. I spent over a year on the mountain learning the shrinking the earth to an inch technique, and it will probably take even longer to study others. The Bailao Society is, after all, a local tyrant. Although their strength is probably far inferior to mine now, what if they have unique methods? Since I'm already here, shouldn't I ask for their guidance?" Zhao San sighed and said, "Originally, to join our Bailao Society, there would be a lot of testing. First, you have to be of the right age. No one under 16 is acceptable, they're not up to par yet, and no one over 20 is acceptable, their fiery spirit isn't strong enough. Originally, someone like you, little Taoist, even if you joined the Bailao Society, you would only be a gopher, and you definitely wouldn't learn any skills. But since the chairman has spoken up today, I'll give you some pointers. How much you learn depends on yourself. I'll teach you 2 magic tricks, one called turtle breath and the other called water tendons and bones. Listen carefully and don't miss any details." Chapter 12 Tricks. Inside the courtyard of the Bai family mansion, Zhao Santong, like a diligent student, explained the various techniques of the world to Zuo Chen. The techniques of the world are incredibly diverse. Some are powerful and ruthless, while others are merely superficial and showy. Once upon a time, a young nobleman from the great Liang dynasty spent a fortune to learn a useless trick while out playing. In a fit of rage, he ordered his heavy cavalry to ride iron horses and behead all the beggars. Afterward, he compiled a list of all the techniques. The list divides the techniques of the world into 5 categories. The first is the showy trick that the nobleman was tricked into learning. This is the lowest level on the list, mainly focusing on being flashy but impractical. It is usually only used by traveling merchants and beggars. Some opera troupes also mainly practice these things. They can only be used to deceive, not to perform in a respectable manner. Secondly, there are skills. Ordinary people can learn these by getting up at dawn and going to bed at sunset, and spending a few years practicing diligently. For example, the wood-chopping knife and mountain songs commonly used by the Chai family are such skills. Thirdly, what I'm going to teach you today, at this level, it's no longer just a trick, but a truly respectable skill, called magic. Ordinary people, without spending more than 10 years practicing these skills, or with the help of unique medicines, will never be able to learn them in their entire lives. Next, there are skills that only aristocratic families and important figures can learn, called methods, which are things that can only be learned after entering the field. Martial arts practitioners cannot learn them. Finally, at the very top, there is a skill called supernatural power. There are probably fewer than one person in the entire martial arts world who knows this, and most of them are just rumors without any real evidence. As for how powerful a martial arts practitioner is, that naturally depends on what skills he has mastered and how powerful those skills are. After listening to Zhao San's explanation, Zuo Chen finally had a general understanding of the ability classifications in the Great Liang. It doesn't sound like it has anything to do with cultivation. Zuo Chen pondered. The 2 tricks I'll teach you today are turtle breathing and water tendons and bones. The former allows you to hold your breath underwater for a long time. With mastery, you can remain motionless underwater for 7 days, concealing your aura from all 7 orifices, making you appear like a corpse. And this water tendons and bones technique allows you to swim like a fish, your body light and graceful, swaying like a dragon. With mastery, even on land, a single palm strike from you can cause your opponent to suffer from water chills and internal organ imbalances. After boasting about the effects of his 2 magic tricks, Zhao San began explaining the detailed principles to Zuo Chen. Although reluctant, Zhao San didn't hold back. He had to obey the guild leader's request, especially since these 2 were the ones to be given to the river god tomorrow. Explaining a couple of tricks to them wouldn't hurt. Zuo Chen was also learning diligently. When he heard about the breathing technique, He not only adjusted his breathing along with Zhao San's actions, but also redirected his own spiritual energy to his lungs. He then discovered that he seemed to be able to breathe air through his skin, and that he could also use similar methods to keep his skin dry and his clothes dry when submerged in water. It really worked. If Zuo Chen had to research this breathing method on his own, it would probably take him a year or two to find the pattern. Now that someone was teaching him, practicing with his own spiritual energy was like a fish in water. It seemed his guess was correct. These techniques learned from martial arts sects and gangs, once properly adjusted, were highly effective methods for a cultivator like him. After listening to the turtle breathing trick and then Zhao San's explanation of the water tendons and bones, Zuo Chen's initial excitement gradually cooled as Zhao San recounted the story. This water tendons and bones was far more sinister than Zuo Chen had imagined. Unlike the turtle breathing technique, which relies entirely on breathing adjustments, cultivating this method required certain external materials. The most important of these was the corpse-soaking water from the sunken river. The cultivator needed to immerse their body in the water, along with some special medicinal herbs, for several years to refine it. This was how the water tendons and bones were considered complete. The resulting body would be as deathly pale as a corpse from the sunken river, with wrinkles on the skin of the hands and feet resembling frog claws. Once in the water, the cultivator would swim like a fish, not only greatly enhancing their aquatic abilities but also becoming soaked in corpse poison. A single slap could cause an ordinary person to fall seriously ill. For the White Elder Society, this was indeed a good method, but for Zuo Chen, this method was likely to affect the purity of his spiritual energy. And it was utterly disgusting. After explaining the magic tricks, Zhao San felt parched. He casually picked up a pot of tea in the courtyard, took a big sip, and then glanced at Zuo Chen. I've explained the 2 tricks I know to you. You can figure out the rest on your own. After saying this, Zhao San left hastily without waiting for Zuo Chen to speak. He explained these 2 techniques as if completing a task, not caring how much Zuo Chen would learn. After Zhao San left, Zuo Chen reflected on the current situation of Dalian as explained by Zhao San. The entire Dalian region seemed completely unrelated to key refining, foundation establishment, core formation, and nascent soul cultivation. Instead, it was eerily mysterious. If he were to travel within Dalian in the future and seek other methods, he would probably have to be careful and selective, lest he learn any unorthodox or evil techniques. Similarly, Zuo Chen dared not underestimate the strength of Dalian. He clearly remembered the old Taoist priest on the mountain whose head had been removed by magic. The old Taoist priest left behind Taoist scriptures, which meant that the old Taoist priest himself was at least a cultivator. In other words, there must be powerful beings within Dalian capable of killing cultivators. When he first came down the mountain, he thought that this place was full of powerful cultivation sects, and that he, a mere foundation establishment cultivator, was likely cannon fodder, so he didn't bother to conceal his abilities. Now, Zuo Chen decided it was best to conceal his identity as a cultivator for a couple more days and see how things went. No major problems. Kai, however, had followed him and witnessed some of his abilities. Zuo Chen turned to look at Kai, who had been excitedly looking at the guest rooms prepared in the courtyard. Upon feeling Zuo Chen's gaze, Kai instinctively shivered. She immediately flashed a fawning smile at Zuo Chen. Master Zuo, is there anything you need me to do? Silver or treasures? We might not be able to afford that right now. Please don't stare at me like that, I don't like it. Zuo Chen's lips twitched slightly. She had seen his abilities, he figured she wouldn't dare to go around bragging. He could test her character later and teach her some skills from the Taoist scriptures. It's late, let's rest first, Zuo Chen said, then went directly into his room. Kai also breathed a sigh of relief, muttering to herself, what was wrong with Master Zuo just now? Those eyes looked terrifying. The next morning, an 8 immortal table was set up in the courtyard, laden with chicken, duck, fish, and meat, and even a mutton soup was prepared to treat Zuo Chen and Kai. The 2, naturally, didn't stand on ceremony and ate heartily, satisfying their hunger. But before they'd even taken a few bites, a man suddenly walked in through the courtyard gate. Old Su. What did you mean by sending me to the ghost village last time? Are you trying to kill me? A bald man with a knife at his waist walked in, cursing as he entered. He immediately spotted Zuo Chen and Kai eating, his eyes widening in surprise. Taoist master? What are you doing here? Chapter 13 You plan to capture the Taoist priest and feed him to the river god? Taoist master? You're too kind. Why didn't you come to our escort agency? Why did you come to the Bai Family Association first? The bald man laughed heartily when he saw Zuo Chen, clearly in a good mood. He moved closer to Zuo Chen but didn't sit down. Instead, he rubbed his hands together, his face full of smiles. He appeared respectful, but no one knew what he was thinking. Old Bai said he had a job to introduce me to, so I came to take a look. What good job could Old Bai possibly have? Remember that ghost village last time? That was the job they introduced me to, and it almost killed me. The bald man shook his head repeatedly, his words full of dissatisfaction with Old Bai. You'd better be careful taking their jobs, lest they rip you off. Liu lazy. What nonsense are you spouting? A male voice shouted from deep within the courtyard. Turning around, Su Fuga emerged. Our Old Bai is upright, and everything we do is above board. Don't you dare spread false accusations against us. With that, Su Fuga stood behind the bald man, his eyes fixed on him menacingly. His words were loud and imposing, and if Zuo Chen hadn't known the truth behind their river god worship ceremony, he probably would have been intimidated by Su Fuga. Upon hearing Su Fuga's words, the bald man called Liu lazy sneered, upright conduct, righteous path, you really have the nerve to say that. Throwing young boys and girls into the river every year, your Bailawei really thinks you're upright. He paused, then noticed Su Fuga's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The entire courtyard fell silent. Still not quite understanding, Liu Lazy assumed Su Fuga was displeased by his exposure of the Bailawei's shady dealings, and smugly snorted, Old Su, you can fool your brothers, but don't fool yourself. Su Fuga ignored him, turning his gaze to Zuo Chen and Kai. Kai immediately sensed something was wrong and shielded Master Zuo in front of her. Chairman Su, when your men called me over, I remember they said just 2 sticks of incense would be enough, Zuo Chen said. Hearing Zuo Chen's words, Liu Lazy finally realized what had just happened. His eyes widened, first pointing at Zuo Chen, then at Su Fuga standing there. You still want to sacrifice Master Zuo to the river god? HMPH, being able to go down to the water palace to pay homage to the river god is a blessing that countless people in the entire Qingzhou city would rather die for. Every year, our Bailao society seeks a pair of virgin boys and girls, and in Qingzhou city, who wouldn't willingly offer their children upon hearing this news? As Su Fuga spoke, a group of young men dressed in blue robes, carrying guard sticks, emerged from the depths of the courtyard behind him. Even Su Fuga himself pulled his hands out of his sleeves. Under the sunlight, his palms appeared a ghastly white, like a corpse, and the skin on his hands even had strange wrinkles. It was as if a long-dead corpse, submerged in water, had returned its limbs to Su Fuga. And even if they took the boy and girl, we at Bailawei gave that family enough compensation. 50 taels of silver is enough for a family to work for 10 years. What's wrong with offering a pair of boys and girls to the river god? Su Fuga looked at Zuo Chen and Kai, a smile on his face. Young husband, young wife, you two should go back to the courtyard and get through today peacefully. Tomorrow I'll change you into new clothes. And we'll go to worship the river god together. Don't worry, in the underground water palace of Baisho Lake, the river god will definitely favor you too. Having said that, these young men, armed with weapons, moved forward, trying to force the two into the room in the courtyard. The boys, wielding knives, spears, and clubs, completely ignored Liu Lazy standing nearby, not believing he would make a move. After all, in Qingzhou City, Liu Lazy's escort agency was far inferior to Bailawei's. If he didn't want to stay in Qingzhou City, he could certainly try to fight. But they were wrong. Seeing Bailawei's group about to attack, Liu Lazy gritted his teeth and drew his butcher's knife from his waist. Lazy, were you out of your mind today? Su Fuga glanced at the precious knife in Liu Lazy's hand. Are these two your relatives? Why are you stopping us from arresting them? Master Zuo saved my life. If it weren't for him, I would have died in that god-forsaken village. Today, even if it costs me my life, I won't let you hurt them. Liu Lazy's eyes widened. He was still apprehensive. After all, he only knew that this Master Zuo had saved him, but he didn't know how the corpse incense in the ghost village had been dealt with. And even if it really was Zuo Chen who was slaughtering people in the ghost village, Liu Lazy didn't think he could handle so many young men. The methods used to kill ghosts might not be effective on humans. But, although they were both in the city, Su Fuge and Liu Lazy weren't very close, and Su Fuge didn't know him well. Liu Lazy couldn't just abandon his savior and run away. Then there's no other way. Su Fuge shook his head with a cold smile, then waved his hand, "Go." At his command, the group of young men charged forward, weapons in hand. Liu Lazy shielded his eyes, his blade flashing forward, ready to slash. Before he could even take a step forward, he suddenly noticed a figure in a robe darting past. Zuo Chen seemed to have only taken 2 steps before appearing before Liu Lazy. He lightly raised his hand, a barely perceptible current flowing from his palm. With a gentle push and sweep of his palm, the young men felt a wave of numbness wash over them. They jolted awake, their hair standing on end, their knees buckling, collapsing to the ground with a thud. Liu Lazy, who had been about to strike, was dumbfounded. What kind of palm technique was this? Having roamed the martial world for so many years, he had seen countless methods and skills, but this palm technique that could suddenly push forward and knock down a whole group of people was something he had never seen before. Su Fuge's eyes narrowed slightly. Su Fuge had already sensed something was wrong when Liu Lazy mentioned that the young Taoist priest had saved his life. Now, seeing him slap down half of his guards with a single blow, Su Fuge knew this was a tough opponent. He rolled up his sleeves, intending to personally confront the young Taoist priest. Meanwhile, the guards, seeing how bizarre Zuo Chen's slap had been, dared not approach him. They didn't want to fight Liu Lazy, who was wielding a butcher's knife, fearing they might lose their heads. So, they turned their attention to Kie. She looked like a weak and frail girl, easy to bully. With that in mind, the group moved towards Kie. Kie never expected that simply watching from the sidelines would attract so many people to attack her. Oh my god. Get out of here. She wanted to escape, but found herself surrounded by the servants on all sides. There was no way she could get out on her own. She was anxious, but most of what she had learned was just for show. The only things she could truly rely on were a fire-making technique, a pill, a trick, and a magic trick. The life-saving pill, as a magic trick, was definitely useless in this situation, but fire, well, maybe it could scare these people away. Thinking of this, Kie pulled out a tinderbox from her bosom and, without thinking twice, channeled all her cultivation into her mouth. However, Kie didn't notice that a wisp of the ki generated from eating the river god yesterday also entered her mouth. She opened her mouth, pinched a handful of flint, and blew hard. Whoosh! A flame appeared out of thin air, instantly igniting half the sky. Chapter 14 Cultivation. The sudden burst of flames was powerful but inaccurate. A large ball of fire spread in all directions from Kie's mouth, first scorching the unfinished food on the central table, turning it to charcoal, then reaching the nearby side rooms, setting half the courtyard ablaze. Finally, it surged towards the surrounding servants, who screamed and rolled on the ground in terror. Even so, the fire managed to set fire to the hair and clothes of 2 or 3 servants, causing them to writhe and howl in pain. The sudden turn of events caused almost everyone to stop what they were doing and turn to look at Kie. Even Kie herself stood there, stunned, completely bewildered by what she had just done. This fire, something was wrong. Kie knew that her fire-breathing technique was just a charade, and a rather rudimentary one at that, nowhere near as good as a proper magic trick. In the past, when she spewed fire, it was usually just a single, powerful spittle, nothing more. Someone very close might only get a sting to their eyebrows or hair, never something like this that could burn down half the courtyard. Su Fuge's face turned extremely grim upon seeing this. Something's up. This young lady is actually from the underworld, he hissed, causing the surrounding servants to flinch. Admittedly, not everyone at the chairman's place was a servant. Several managers from the White Elder Society were mixed in. They each possessed their own skills, and their methods were impressive, but ultimately, these were just tricks. Could you really challenge someone from the underworld? Could you charge at them with a stick and smash their head? What if she breathed fire on me and burned me to a crisp? In an instant, the group shrank back, none daring to approach. Standing to the side, Zuo Chen first marveled at the flames, then surveyed the people around him. Most of them didn't exude any murderous aura, only a hint of ferocity, suggesting they were usually arrogant and domineering. Su Fuge, however, didn't possess direct murderous aura, but carried a significant amount of karma. Zuo Chen's brow twitched slightly. Seeing the surrounding area burned, Su Fuge was furious, shouting, "You scoundrel who destroyed my Bailao Wei, prepare to die. After shouting this, his gaze first lingered on Liu Lazy, realizing he couldn't defeat him in a few moves, then looked at Kai, feeling he might not be able to win. Finally, his gaze settled on Zuo Chen. He immediately stood up and struck Zuo Chen in the abdomen. No matter what techniques you practice, my water tendons and bones, water cold penetrates the body, a palm strike to your dantian, even if you don't die, will cripple most of your cultivation. He flew over, his speed indeed fast. Zuo Chen, however, simply raised his foot. Get out of here. The kick landed squarely on Su Fuga's stomach. Su Fuga felt a powerful force, and he was sent flying backward, crashing into the burning room. With a bang, the entire room collapsed, and the flames fell on Su Fuga. Master. The servants around them, no longer caring about chasing Zuo Chen and his group, hurriedly fetched water to fight the fire and rescue the people. Seeing that the group wasn't surrounding them, Zuo Chen grabbed Liu Lazy by the collar with one hand and tucked Kai under his arm with the other. Taking a step forward, the surrounding scenery changed dramatically in an instant. In the blink of an eye, Zuo Chen had led the two away from the encirclement of the courtyard. By the time they had rescued the blackened Su Fuga from the fire, Zuo Chen and his group were nowhere to be seen. The servants helped Su Fuga to a chair to rest, and he coughed several times to expel the black smoke from his lungs. Su Fuga's water tendon bone technique granted him the ability to ward off fire. The fire passed over him with little effect, leaving him with only minor injuries. After resting for a while, Su Fuga suddenly felt as if his internal energy was being blocked. He tried to regulate his ki, but felt as if a thin membrane was blocking his dantian, slowly disrupting his aura. Damn it, what kind of trick did that little Taoist priest use when he kicked me? The more Su Fuga thought about it, the angrier he became. He slammed his fist on the table and ordered his men, "You guys, immediately send men to surround that lousy escort agency of Liu Lazy's. I want to see if that Liu Lazy will ever go back to his agency." "Where's your escort agency?" Zuo Chen, carrying Liu Lazy, asked casually. Liu Lazy hadn't reacted yet, just blankly pointing in a direction. Zuo Chen nodded, then continued strolling through the town as if taking a leisurely walk, and in less than a few breaths, he saw a large courtyard on the edge of the town. A plaque hung above the courtyard, the four large characters NJIU Escort Agency gleaming brightly in the sunlight. Liu Lazy stared blankly at the gate of his own escort agency before finally reacting. I'm back. What kind of light-footed skill is this? My escort agency is on the edge of the city, and the Bailao's headquarters is in the middle. Even at top speed, it would take half an hour to get there. How long has it been? I'm back already. Wow, the Taoist priest skill is too high. After Zuo Chen released his grip on Liu Lazy's collar, Liu Lazy bowed to Zuo Chen with a beaming smile. "Taoist priest, you must be tired. Why don't you come in and rest?" Liu Lazy could tell that the Taoist priest and this girl were both highly skilled. The girl in colorful clothes' fire-breathing technique was clearly a master-level skill. Although he didn't know why it hadn't worked in the ghost village yesterday, someone who could learn such a technique was definitely far superior to them. Mere, Jianghuke, a term referring to people who wander the martial arts world. If I can build a good relationship with these two and get a trick or two from them, then Old Man Bai will be a real threat. Then I'll have to trouble Chief Escort Liu. Liu Lazy immediately nodded with a smile, then strode confidently into the courtyard. Soon, Zuo Chen heard Liu Lazy's shouts coming from inside. It sounded very similar to Zhao San's yesterday, prepare wine and food, but much more enthusiastic. Zuo Chen didn't enter the courtyard immediately. Instead, he placed his hand on Kai's shoulder. This startled Kai, who hesitated for a moment, unsure whether to move. Suddenly, Kai felt an indescribable heat emanating from the hand on her shoulder. This heat surged through her body, quickly reaching her dantian. The wisp of ki in her lower abdomen, which she hadn't yet noticed, was also activated, rapidly circulating throughout her body. Kai was initially stunned, then a look of joy appeared on her face. Although she didn't know what it was, judging from her intuition, it seemed to be a kind of breathing technique. Master Zuo was teaching her a skill. Kai quickly memorized the feeling of this energy flow, and at this moment, she finally discovered the tiny, slightly pulsating energy in her dantian. Remember this, and cultivate according to this feeling in the future. Zuo Chen withdrew his hand and instructed Kai. Kai nodded seriously, intending to bow to Zuo Chen directly, but was stopped. "You are not my disciple yet, I am just giving you some pointers. Kai chuckled twice. Looking at Kai's expression, Zuo Chen could only smile helplessly. He hadn't expected that a bowl of fish soup yesterday would actually allow Kai to condense a wisp of innate true qi in her stomach. Was this considered dietary supplement? After finishing these things at the entrance, the two entered the escort agency. Liu Lazy had prepared a feast for them, and the manor was bustling with activity. Outside King's House City, a young man in black moved with lightning speed, rushing directly into the temple. He scrambled to his knees before Chu Sun, whispering a few words in a low voice. Chu Sun, who had been meditating, slightly opened his eyes, a hint of doubt in them. Su Fuga's courtyard was burned down? Who did it? The servant shook his head. The Bai family has kept this very secret. We haven't been able to find out anything. Chu Sun thought for a few seconds, then rose, lifting his robe. He pulled 3 incense sticks from the incense burner beside him and walked towards the temple exit. You all entertain that lord well. Master, what brings you here? The servant asked hurriedly. I'm going to the city myself to see what's going on. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15: The Enclosure. The Zhengjiu Escort Agency's compound was clearly smaller than the Bailao Wei's, and its interior decoration was far from opulent, but the atmosphere was noticeably more lively. Upon entering the courtyard, there were few guards to be seen, but several workers were bustling about. There was a square table, also laden with various dishes, and while the overall atmosphere seemed less extravagant than the Bailao Wei's, the food looked far more appetizing to Zuo Chen. Beside the table stood 2 beautiful women. One with ample breasts and a pregnant woman, the other slender and charming, though her makeup was slightly heavy. They were also busy preparing the banquet, their faces beaming with smiles. Nearby, several young men were practicing with various weapons, short wooden sticks, short swords, showing off their moves. Most of them cast curious glances at Zuo Chen and Kai. Their eyes lingered on Kai more than Zuo Chen, their gaze is almost fixed on her. Liu Lazy saw this and immediately slapped each of the young men across the face. What the hell are you looking at? How dare you look at such a beautiful young lady? After Liu Lazy's scolding, the young men immediately became obedient and continued practicing their skills diligently. After reprimanding his disciples, Liu Lazy chuckled and approached Zuo Chen and Kai. Please don't be offended, you two. These are just teenagers who have never seen such a beautiful young lady before. I disciplined them, and now they dare not look at us like that anymore. Zuo Chen didn't answer, but turned to Kai. Kai scratched her head sheepishly. It's nothing serious. After speaking, Kai's mouth watered as she looked at the roast chicken on the table. Although she had eaten a couple of bites at Bai Leohu's place, the incident on the way there meant those 2 bites weren't enough to fill her stomach, they only whetted her appetite. Seeing Kai's appearance, Liu Lazy burst into laughter. Bring on the banquet. Bring on the banquet. Kai beamed. After entering the banquet, Liu Lazy drank a few cups, his face flushed, and then pulled over 2 beautiful women, saying, These 2 are my wives. This is my first wife, this is my second wife, and this is my child. As he said this, Liu Lazy chuckled and touched the woman's belly. Taoist master, it was all thanks to you back then. If it weren't for you, my 2 wives would probably be widows, and my child wouldn't be able to see his father. Plus, with the wickedness of those women in the city, our escort agency might have been wiped out. His voice trembled as he spoke, and he stood up, intending to kneel before Zuo Chen. The 2 women followed suit. Zuo Chen pushed forward, and the 3 of them felt a gentle breeze on their faces, their knees being pushed back. It's just that you weren't quite dead back then. After all, I saw more than a dozen people when we entered the village, and only the 3 of you survived. I think you're lucky. Hearing Zuo Chen's words, Liu Lazy's eyes welled up slightly, but he couldn't say a word. Zuo Chen glanced at the pregnant woman, thought for a moment, and took out another red egg from the bamboo basket, placing it in Liu Lazy's hand. Let your wife try it later, I brought it down from the mountain. Liu Lazy had already witnessed Zuo Chen's miraculous and profound methods, so he guessed that the red egg also had some wonders. He accepted the egg as if it were a treasure, planning to bathe and exude fragrance before eating it that night. Before long, The food was finished amidst the clinking of glasses, and just as Liu Lazy was about to let Zuo Chen and his wife stay the night, a commotion suddenly came from outside the door. Then, the escort agency's men stumbled into the courtyard. The Bai Lao Wei, old Bai society, has sent men to surround us. Upon hearing this, Liu Lazy's eyes widened. These bastards, they actually dare to come here. He cursed and picked up his knife, calling to the group of young men practicing their martial arts, ready to go out and fight the Bai Lao Wei. But just as he stood up, Zuo Chen suddenly reached out and grabbed him. "Master Zuo? Let me see your knife." Hearing Zuo Chen's request, Liu Lazy looked puzzled, but he still obediently took out his knife and placed it in Zuo Chen's hand. As soon as the knife was in his hand, Zuo Chen could feel a wisp of murderous aura emanating from the blade. It was indeed a fine knife. The blade had been diligently maintained, and when drawn from its sheath, a flash of cold light could be seen on its tip. A weapon for cutting people. Zuo Chen pinched the blade between his fingertips, coating it with a trace of his own true ki. The murderous aura on the entire blade vanished instantly, replaced by an indescribable ethereal quality. "All right." Zuo Chen handed the blade to Liu Lazy. Liu Lazy carefully took the blade. He didn't know why, but he felt that this blade was completely different from before. Liu Lazy couldn't describe this feeling. He hadn't attended a private school and wasn't very learned. If he had to put it into words, a blade that cost 50 taels of silver had become a blade worth 50 taels of gold. Liu Lazy didn't know where his confidence came from, but he picked up the brand new precious blade and led his group out of the courtyard. When he came out, he found that a large crowd had already gathered outside the courtyard. These guys were all armed, and they all looked fierce. They were all skilled fighters kept by the Bai family. Just looking at them, the lineup was even more impressive than when they broke through the encirclement. After all, the breakout was a spur-of-the-moment decision, and Su Fuga hadn't been able to gather all the nearby managers. The guards, while capable fighters, were nothing special. Now, with Su Fuga's order, even the idle managers of the Bai Lao Wei had rushed over, making the area in front of Zhangjiayu escort agency a chaotic mess. Liu Lazy then turned his gaze to the leader. A muscular man around 40 years old, carrying a knife, exuding a fierce aura. Seeing him, Liu Lazy's mood grew slightly heavy. This man was a protector of the Bai Lao Wei. Who was the most capable fighter in the Bai Lao Wei? It certainly wasn't Su Fuga. Su Fuga was shrewd and skilled in management, a good leader, and while he possessed some skills, he was still a step below those truly fierce men. This protector was a highly skilled individual that Su Fuga had hired at great expense. I heard this man used to be a bandit in a mountain stronghold, killing many people. He's reckless, single-minded, and ruthless when it comes to action. He's notorious in Qingzhou City for his cruelty. These days, the government doesn't care, so he's been running rampant. Su Fuga even got him a precious sword a while ago, which has only emboldened this protector. He's not easy to deal with here. Liu Lazy felt a slight unease. Chapter 16 The Precious Sword. Chu soon walked through Qingzhou City, finding the streets bustling and noisy. He was currently wearing a human skin mask, and without crying or laughing, no one could tell it was a fake face. After all, making such a mask was troublesome. It required selecting a strong, healthy man of suitable age, peeling off his skin with a knife dipped in medicine while he was still alive, and then soaking it in medicine for several days. Only after such a process could a human skin mask be made. It would be strange if it were easily seen through. Why was he wearing such a mask into the city? Naturally, it was the work of his mortal enemy, Bai Lao Wei. Since the Wangxiang gang's defeat in their struggle against Bai Lao Wei, his gang leader had been labeled a heretic, a rat in the city, hated by everyone. It was infuriating. Bai Lao Wei's men are all mobilized. They seem quite anxious. It looks like the burning of their courtyard really angered that good-for-nothing Su Fuga. Speaking of which family is so capable, they actually dare to confront Bai Lao Wei head-on. Thinking to himself, Chu soon didn't slow his pace and followed closely behind the Bai Lao Wei group. He concealed himself behind alleyways and dilapidated stone walls, unnoticed by anyone. In this way, Chu soon quickly followed Bai Lao Wei to the edge of the city. Quite a few people, even that protector is here. Chu soon immediately grasped the situation. He raised an eyebrow slightly, hid behind a tree not far away, and quietly observed. Liu Lazy, how dare you? You actually dared to set fire to our Bai Lao Wei. The protector's eyes widened, flashing a fierce light. An ordinary person would likely have their legs go weak from the glare. But Liu Lazy was a bodyguard escort, and others might not fear him. Liu Lazy snorted coldly, gripping his knife. The strange sensation from the blade reassured him, and his voice hardened. You Bailao Wei have been bullying King's House City for years, kidnapping children and throwing them into the river. Now that you've been wronged, you come running to yell at your grandpa. You son of a bitch. The protector, hot-tempered, drew his knife, his eyes gleaming with bloodlust. Everyone in King's House City knows to offer incense to the river god. How come you've become the Bailao Wei pushing people into the river? I think you're dissatisfied with the river god. Why don't you go and talk to the river god about it yourself? Liu Lazy felt a slight unease upon hearing this. Even with immense skill, he couldn't possibly fight the river god, nor could he contend with the Taoist priest sitting in the courtyard. After all, humans are humans, and gods are gods. Anyone capable of killing a god must be an old immortal. But thinking that even if he admitted defeat, given the Bailao Wei's nature, they probably wouldn't let him go, Liu Lazy gritted his teeth. I respect the river god, not your Bailao Wei. Stop playing games with me. You came here today just to fight, didn't you? Come on. I'm ready. Liu Lazy stepped out of the courtyard and walked up to the protector. Good lad, worthy of being a bodyguard escort, you've got guts. The protector sneered. Unfortunately, over the years, I've killed plenty of people with guts. Adding you to my blade today wouldn't hurt. Having said that, the protector immediately drew his precious sword. Unlike the old butcher's knife in Liu Lazy's hand, this sword gleamed coldly the moment it was drawn, and even at midday. Frost covered the ground where its light touched. Liu Lazy was also a connoisseur of swords, and as soon as this long sword was drawn, he could tell at a glance that this thing was far superior to his own sword. His face turned a little green. Although the Taoist priest seemed to have placed some kind of spell on the sword he had just given him, even the most powerful spell couldn't make this sword stronger or sharper. If these two swords clashed, and his butcher's knife was cut in two, wouldn't he also be split in two? Oh no. Thinking this, the protector didn't give Liu Lazy a chance to back down. He jumped forward and swung his sword at Liu Lazy's head. Take this from your grandfather. Liu Lazy had no time to dodge and could only sigh inwardly. He hurriedly drew his own knife and met the attack. The two knives met in midair, but there was no clanging sound. Liu Lazy felt strange. He didn't even feel any force on his arm, only a gust of wind blowing past him. What was going on? Instinctively looking up, Liu Lazy realized that the protector's so-called treasured knife had snapped in two in the attack. His own knife was still pointing upwards, just as it had in its defensive stance. Liu Lazy and the protector were both stunned, frozen in their positions, one slashing downwards, the other upwards, like two female characters on a stage, frozen in place. The protector first stared blankly at himself, his broken knife in his hand, then at Liu Lazy. What kind of knife is that, my finest knife? Now Liu Lazy was finally emboldened. He brandished his sword, twirling it in the air, intending to decapitate the protector with a single blow. But then, he thought it wouldn't do to let the protector's blood stain his precious blade. So, instead, he extended a foot and kicked the protector directly in the head. The protector, his sword broken, seemed to have lost all his spirit. The kick should have been impossible to land, but now he stood there, seemingly dazed, letting the large foot slam into his face. He was sent flying. He rolled several times, crashing into the crowd amidst the gasps of the White Elder Society members, covered in dirt. He straightened up again, glared fiercely at Liu Lazy, then suddenly spat out blood and collapsed to the ground, his life hanging in the balance. Everyone present was filled with fear, but no one dared to touch him. Just one kick, and this man was already like this? Chu Sun, who had been hiding behind a tree and observing the entire situation, was slightly startled. That bastard Su Fuge, he's given his protector a life-testing sword. Such a precious sword, though incredibly sharp, meant that if the sword was there, the protector would die. Having his tendons severed in an instant, the protector's spirit and energy had naturally dissipated. And then, kicked like that, who else could survive? But what kind of sword was this bodyguard escort holding? Chu Sun had traveled far and wide for many years and seen many strange objects, but a sword that could cut a life-testing sword like tofu was something he had never seen before. It seemed that they had obtained the sword, which was why he dared to challenge the Bai family. If only that sword were in my hands. Chapter 17 Strange Key. Everyone had left. The Bailao Society wasn't like an army. Most of its members were people making a living in Qingzhou City. Although they verbally professed loyalty and devotion to the Bailao Society, seeing their most capable protector's sword broken and his lifeless body, their resolve crumbled. A full-scale attack might indeed take down this Hangzhou escort agency, but how many would die at the forefront? Nobody knew. And who would die? Nobody knew that either. As the saying goes, how much can you earn in a month's salary? Why risk your life? The young escorts hadn't even reacted when the Bailao Society left, until they were completely out of sight, before they cheered. Most people in the city had been overshadowed by the Bailao Society. Today, seeing the Protector and his men arrive, the escorts expected a fierce battle, but they never imagined their own leader would so easily kill a prominent figure in the city. What's truly exhilarating? This is the most exhilarating thing. Back in the courtyard, Liu Lazy sent the group of young men back to practice their kung fu, while he himself sidled up to Zuo Chen, beaming. He could pull out a precious sword with a touch, and cross half a city in a few steps. What else could you be but a deity? The White Elder Society? That's just a Kanba. Taoist Master, thank you so much today. If it weren't for you, I'm afraid I'd be dead. That's because you're skilled enough, it really has nothing to do with me, Zuo Chen said with a smile. Then, Zuo Chen asked with slight doubt, Old Bai openly brought so many people to cause trouble here, doesn't the government care? Hearing this question, Liu Lazy was taken aback at first, then gave a bitter smile. Taoist Master, you may not have left the mountain for a long time and don't know the situation outside. The world is in chaos now. The late emperor died young, and the young emperor was only 12 when he ascended the throne. How could he possibly control those corrupt officials? Many vassal kings raise their own armies and simply govern their own territories. With things like this, how can the government possibly manage anything? Liu Lazy sighed deeply and continued, we in Qingzhou are still relatively fortunate. We have Beishao Lake, which provides both water and rice, and we're far from the capital. We can still survive in this world. Other places are even worse off. A while ago, I went to Shuzhou on a delivery mission, and there was a famine there. The bark on trees under 6 feet tall along the roadside had been completely gnawed off. I saw a child on the road, not even a foot tall, wearing a little vest, walking on the dirt road. The villagers saw me and told me that a family was going out of money and had left the child there, praising me as a good family and hoping I would take the child in. I was busy escorting goods at the time, how could I pay attention to him? I could only watch him walk away until he disappeared from sight. Hearing Liu Lazy's words, Zuo Chen felt a slight pang of emotion. Indeed, it was a chaotic world. When he encountered the slave trader in the village, Zuo Chen didn't have such a deep understanding of the world state. But after Liu Lazy said these words, he truly felt what the current situation was like. After speaking, Liu Lazy chuckled and said to Zuo Chen, someone as capable as you could have easily taken their heads at the White Elders meeting without anyone objecting. They weren't particularly vicious. Taking their heads would have damaged my cultivation. As for the most vicious one, he won't live more than a few days. Zuo Chen waved his hand and asked, has the bodyguard escort ever heard of any immortals while traveling the country? Although Liu Lazy was curious about what Zuo Chen meant by won't live more than a few days, he didn't press the matter. Instead, he answered Zuo Chen's question, immortals? I have indeed heard of them. It's said that there are immortals further north, and the various vassal kings also worship immortals in their homes. I don't really know the specifics, the border is too far away, and I don't know what the immortals in the north are, nor do I know what the vassal kings' homes are. Zuo Chen silently noted this down. The immortals worshipped in the homes of vassal kings might not be true immortals, cultivators rarely willingly enter the mortal world. The north might be the place. After all, such a large dynasty couldn't possibly have only one cultivator, could it? Zuo Chen didn't think he was anything special. Things in this world are never unique, even without the immortal sect of longevity. Zuo Chen felt it wouldn't be difficult to find someone with similar cultivation. They could discuss it together, and who knows, they might even find the method for forming the golden core. Sigh, condensing the golden core is really difficult. Zuo Chen sighed inwardly. Where did Chu Sun go? A young man with a plain face sat in the main seat, holding a teacup. Two maids stood on either side of him, one gently massaging his legs, the other massaging his shoulders. These two maids were also strangely dressed. They wore blood-red tops and gray underpants, their hair tied in 2 top knots. Their pretty faces were painted white with powder, except for blood-red dots on their eyebrows and cheeks. Their eyes were wide open, seemingly never blinking. They looked more like ghosts than humans. Before him, a leader of the fragrance gang, his forehead beaded with cold sweat, hurriedly said, "Something happened in the city. My leader went to the city to investigate to ensure tomorrow's offerings are on track. He should be back soon." King's Hao isn't a big place, but there's plenty of business, the young man sneered. The leader below dared not speak, only kneeling on the ground with a forced smile. "Tomorrow's altar offering is an opportunity I'm giving you. If you handle it well, you can offer me more tributes later. If you don't, then consider it my fault for choosing the wrong person." His words sounded nonchalant, but cold sweat poured down the leader's forehead. He remembered Chu Sun telling him, "A noble of this rank has exceptional insight, what he observes cannot be wrong. If this matter is not accomplished, then those who work for him are unnecessary. You may leave." The leader hurriedly retreated from the mansion. After he left, the young man patted the head of the maid who was tapping his leg. "Go and check by the river. There's no one useful here in King's Hao. I don't trust them with anything." "Yes, young master." The maid got up and walked outside, her body radiating a chilling aura, and vanished in the blink of an eye. Inside the fragrance gang, a cold wind blew through the room, and many shivered. The less skilled members on the outside even sneezed several times and caught a cold on the spot. This chilling wind also blew out of the courtyard, out of the town, and towards Whitehead Lake. About half an hour later, the maid appeared by the river. She bent down, staring wide-eyed at the river. "Carp, Carp, where are you playing?" "Carp, Carp, young master wants to see you." After a long silence, a hint of surprise suddenly appeared on the maid's usually calm face. "Carp, Carp, where's your corpse?" Zuo Chen, who was sitting in the courtyard making tea, stopped. "Strange, strange, strange." He said strange 3 times, then got up and walked out of the courtyard. "Taoist?" Kai, who was playing with the cartilage she had gnawed out of the lamb leg, asked suspiciously when she saw Zuo Chen get up. "I'll go out for a bit." After saying that, Zuo Chen slowly stepped out and was out of the courtyard in an instant. "What's going on?" Kai was full of questions. Zuo Chen, who was walking, also felt a few questions. He sensed ki. Very weak, but it was definitely the ki of a cultivator. However, why did this ki feel so sinister? So strange? Chapter 18 Paper Doll for Money. The maid stood by the lake, tilting her head, a look of bewilderment in her small eyes. The river god is dead? Who killed him? Why can't I even sense his vengeful spirit? Helplessness, confusion, and incomprehension welled up within her. She had met this river god with her young master. Among the spirits of the surrounding mountains and lakes, he was considered quite powerful. Even her young master had to perform rituals, offering valuables, gold, silver, and even live pigs and yin rice to subdue him. Yet, after just one night, the river god was dead. How strange. She uttered 2 words expressionlessly and prepared to return to report. But as soon as she turned around, she suddenly saw a crooked-looking Taoist priest wearing a tall crown appear behind her. Zuo Chen also stared at the girl before him, scrutinizing her with interest. He had only sensed strange ki earlier, but now, upon closer inspection, Zuo Chen was certain that this was likely an evil being. Her cheeks were flushed and turned upwards, making her look almost inhuman. "Young lady, what are you doing by the river?" Zuo Chen asked with a smile. The maid looked at Zuo Chen with suspicion. In her eyes, this Taoist priest seemed like an ordinary person without any cultivation, but for some reason, she sensed a sense of danger. "I'm here on my young master's orders to check on the fish in this river," the maid said. "My young master took a fancy to fish in the river, but when I came to check, it was dead. Could this fish be the river god?" Judging from her tone, her young master must be quite skilled. Could he be a Taoist cultivator? But the aura emanating from her. Is the person opposite him a ghost cultivator? Zuo Chen became extremely vigilant. He was hoping to encounter a Taoist cultivator, but he didn't expect to run into a ghost cultivator. 9 out of 10 ghost cultivators are bad, and the 10th is especially bad. It wasn't that Zuo Chen had a prejudice against ghost cultivators, but to be honest, the Shanking Thunder Law and ghosts were inherently incompatible. One was extremely yang and strong, while the other was extremely yin and evil. They were naturally at odds. However, the ki within this maid's body was far too weak, In Zuo Chen's view, it was practically something that could be dispersed with a gentle breath. It was far less potent than the key from the river god's food. Seeing that Zuo Chen remained silent, the maid said, "This is none of your business. Leave now." With that, she reached into her robes, pulled out several silver ingots, and tossed them towards Zuo Chen. Zuo Chen caught them casually. The silver felt cool to the touch, with a slightly strange quality. After a few seconds, a strange smile appeared on his face. "Little girl, this silver doesn't seem so easy to handle. Aren't you afraid of paying for your life?" the maid asked curiously. "Paying for your life?" Zuo Chen's smile turned cold. "This is quite a treasure. If it fell into the hands of a strong young man, these 2 taels of silver could probably kill him by 30 or 40 years. But for any slightly older farmer, this little bit of money would probably buy his life directly. Small money, big business." The maid's expressionless face finally betrayed a palpable panic in her eyes. This life-saving money was a treasure crafted by the young master, requiring burial goods and special corpse water to concoct. Even a skilled martial artist would likely lose half their life if they touched it, let alone a peasant. Yet this Taoist priest treated it as if nothing had happened. Without further hesitation, the maid turned to run. Just as she transformed into a gust of cold wind, she suddenly found Zuo Chen behind her. Zuo Chen reached out and, as if lifting a cat, grabbed the maid by the back of her collar. "You paid me 2 taels of silver, so naturally you should stay and have a good chat with me. Why don't you take me to see your young master?" Hearing Zuo Chen's words, the maid suddenly turned her head, aimed at his head, and opened her mouth. Hoo-hoo! A chilling wind swept directly at him. Zuo Chen frowned slightly, exhaling through his nostrils, and directly pushed the wind back against him. The maid felt a blur before her eyes, as if a mountain was pressing down on her. She only had time to let out a strange cry. PFFT. Zuo Chen felt a lightness in his hand. Looking down, he found a paper effigy made of wood and red paper. The effigy looked exactly like the maid from before, red clothes, gray trousers, white face, and rosy cheeks. Its 2 top knots jiggled, but it lacked any semblance of life. The strange energy emanating from her had been dispersed by Zuo Chen's breath. With a gentle lift, the paper effigy crackled under the weight, then scattered on the ground, turning into broken pieces of wood and paper. Zuo Chen stood there, somewhat embarrassed. He hadn't expected it to be so fragile. Discarding the effigy, Zuo Chen squatted down and studied it for a while, concluding it was likely just a trick used by that young master. It was a pity he didn't know where that young master was, otherwise, Zuo Chen would have really wanted to see how much karmic debt the ghost cultivator who concocted this kind of life-selling money carried. Shaking his head slightly, Zuo Chen didn't linger. He turned and walked towards the escort agency. Inside the scent of fragrance gang, a young man enjoying a shoulder massage held a teapot in his palm, rubbing the lid against it while closing his eyes to relax. But before he could even finish 2 strokes, the maid behind him suddenly let out a strange cry. The young man's hand trembled, and the teapot tipped over. Tea spilled onto his trousers, completely soaking his groin area. "You?" The young man turned angrily to look at the maid, only to find her eyes glazed over, and she fell straight backward. Thump! She crashed to the floor. When he looked again, she had transformed back into a paper doll, completely devoid of her previous lifelike appearance. This? The young man's anger dissipated, replaced by utter panic. These were his grandfather's precious paper figures. How could they suddenly break? These 2 paper figures were quite formidable, and with the treasures they carried, they could even kill a renowned martial arts master. Furthermore, the true energy his grandfather had instilled in them made the 2 sisters incredibly lifelike. It was impossible for them to suddenly break. The young man quickly took out a compass, fiddled with it a couple of times, and his eyes darkened. The maid he had sent to the riverbank was also lifeless. It seemed his maid had encountered some powerful figure at the river, who had used a magic formula to kill her, and also dissipated the sister's true energy. Who in Kingzhou City possessed such power? Should he still offer sacrifices to the river god tomorrow? The young man was filled with bewilderment. After much thought, he gritted his teeth and took out an incense stick from his robes. "I must report this to my grandfather," he muttered to himself. Chapter 19 Stealing the Knife. If only I had this knife. Ever since Chu Sun saw the precious knife in Liu Lazy's hand, he was completely captivated, his mind and eyes fixed on the gleaming blade. As a former local strongman of Kingzhou City, Chu Sun prided himself on having seen many treasures. Some were malevolent, like masks that could steal a person's soul, rattles that could lure children away with a mere flick of the wrist. Others were righteous, like official seals that could punish criminals with a single strike, general spears that would surely kill anyone stabbed. But this particular knife seemed strange to Chu Sun. It was dazzling, possessing an inexplicable spiritual energy. This treasure was exceptional. Even the golden boy and jade girl he had promised to offer as a sacrifice to the river god couldn't compare. To return to King Zhao City, he had already emptied most of his Wangxiangang's treasury. If he could retrieve this knife, all those previous losses would be insignificant, allowing him to rise to prominence once more. Chu Sun paced around the entrance several times before finally making up his mind. Steal the knife? After thinking it through, he took out an incense stick from his pocket, lit it with a tinderbox, then tore off a strip of cloth and tied it around his forehead, inserting the incense stick directly in front of his forehead. Immediately afterward, Chu Sun leaped onto a willow tree next to the escort agency, using the tree as a springboard to land lightly on the wall. Once firmly on the wall, Chu Sun looked down into the courtyard. He could see a group of young men practicing martial arts in the side courtyard, and in the center of the main courtyard, an 8-immortal table where Liu Lazy, drunk, was fast asleep. Opposite the table, a pretty girl was fiddling with her cartilage, looking utterly bored. And a knife lay quietly beside the table. Perfect timing. Chu Sun nimbly descended from the wall and stealthily made his way to the table, seemingly oblivious to the pretty girl opposite him. However, the incense stick above his head suddenly burst into flames. Chu Sun was startled. What was that? This incense only burned so quickly when it encountered someone with real skill. He knew Liu Lazy, but his abilities were only average. The girl at the table didn't seem to possess any extraordinary aura. Could it be because of this treasured sword? Chu Sun thought it was very likely. The sword was spiritually potent, capable of dispelling surrounding magic barriers, not surprising. Thinking this, Chu Sun felt both nervous and eager. This treasure was destined for him, so it should rightfully be in his hands. Taking 3 steps at a time, Chu Sun crouched on the ground like a mouse, and in a flash, he was beside the sword, grabbing it in one hand. Overjoyed, he immediately turned to run, but suddenly noticed the pretty girl staring at him. Kai blinked, her mind racing. Damn it! Thief! Hearing Kai's shout, Liu Lazy jolted awake from his dream. He turned and saw Chu Sun gripping the hilt of the knife. Chu Sun was horrified. He touched his head. The incense was still burning. How did this damned woman find out? He didn't care anymore. Now that he had the knife, running away was the only option. With a leap, Chu Sun turned to run, but Liu Lazy wouldn't let him leave with a precious knife. Damn it, you've tried to steal my knife. He reached for the scabbard, but somehow the blade and scabbard wouldn't separate. They were stuck together like glue. For a moment, Chu Sun and Liu Lazy were frozen in place. Strange knife. Chu Sun was frantic. A group of strong young men nearby had already heard the commotion in the courtyard and were rushing over. Although Chu Sun's methods were powerful, he needed to prepare in advance by setting up an altar and performing rituals. If he were surrounded by these brutes now, he would surely lose his life. Kai, who was watching from the side, was also anxious, but she didn't know what to do. She couldn't just breathe fire, could she? She hadn't practiced a range of her new move yet. What if she breathed fire and burned down the escort agency? In her anxiety, her ki surged up, and without thinking twice, she directly channeled her ki into her jawbone. Hey! Kai shouted, and directly smashed the jawbone down on Chu Sun's Beihu point. Bang! Chu Sun felt a sharp pain on the top of his head. The pain stimulated his ferocity. He gritted his teeth and pulled hard, actually managing to draw his sword from its sheath. Overjoyed to have the knife, Chu Sun was about to mock Liu Lazy when he suddenly felt something in his mouth. He spat it out, and what fell to the ground was a cartilage? Chu Sun? What is this thing? What trick did that bitch use? She slapped me on the head, and this thing ended up in my mouth? Chu Sun quickly touched his head. There was no wound. How strange. Seeing the bodyguards closing in, even with a precious knife, Chu Sun dared not delay. He leaped over the wall again and ran away as fast as he could. Seeing the thief run away, Liu Lazy was furious yet filled with grievance. Large tears streamed down his face. My knife? My knife? He burst into tears. Kai panicked, unsure what to do. Taoist master. Why did you go out at this time? Chu Sun, clutching the knife, ran swiftly towards the town outside the city. His heart was filled with joy, his eyes narrowing. Haha. The treasure is in my hands. With this knife, even without paying tribute to the Golden Boy and Jade Girl, he could slaughter the Bai family without leaving a single survivor. Then, wouldn't he still be the one calling the shots in King's Hao? As for this Hangjiu escort agency, Liu Lazy's skills were only average. Once he returned, prepared the altar, and offered 3 sticks of incense in the direction of the agency, ruining Liu Lazy's fortune and luck, would he still come knocking on his door demanding the knife? His steps were swift, without stopping. Chu Sun ran back to the town in just half an hour, reaching his gang's courtyard. Upon entering, he suddenly noticed many of his men nervously surrounding the VIP small house. What was going on? He hadn't even been gone half a day. What were these men doing? Frowning, Chu Sun approached one of his men and patted him on the shoulder. The henchman turned around, saw his boss, and a relieved expression appeared on his face. Boss, the important person has locked himself in his room, and we don't know what he's doing. We don't dare go up and ask. Damn useless trash. Chu Sun was angry and opened his mouth to scold his subordinate. But as soon as he opened his mouth, several things suddenly dripped out of his mouth. They landed on the ground with a clatter. Chu Sun looked down and discovered that what had fallen from his mouth were several cartilage bones. Chapter 20. The River God Festival is tomorrow. When the young man came out of the room, he saw Chu Sun spitting out bones while holding a knife. Young Master Zhao, cough cough, please take a look at me, cough cough, what's going on? Chu Sun paused 3 times, spitting out a bone each time. The bones were of varying sizes, all different shapes and sizes. Young Master Zhao frowned deeply. Why was this local gang leader spitting out bones after going out for a while? He walked to Chu Sun's side, frowning as he looked him up and down, then a hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. There are such experts in King's House City? What? Chu Sun's heart sank upon hearing young Master Zhao's words. Young Master Zhao came from a powerful family, even having the backing of a prince. He was knowledgeable and capable. Anyone he called an expert must possess considerable power. He'd only been tapped on the head by that little girl, and this was the result? The other person didn't even look that old. What exactly happened to you? Tell me quickly. Young Master Zhao's complexion wasn't good either. He had just spoken with his grandfather, been scolded, and then given the task of investigating who had blown away the energy within the 2 paper dolls. As a result, he, a temporary subordinate, had been cursed. And the method of the curse was so sophisticated. Even if he used his little toe, he knew that the person who gave Chu Sun the prescription was probably related to the person who broke the paper dolls. Before he came, he didn't see many experts in King's House City, but after he arrived, they sprang up like mushrooms after rain. Isn't this bullying? Chu Sun stammered, then held the knife behind his back, and then coughed again, spitting out 2 pieces of bone. Seeing his reaction, young Master Zhao sneered, the curse in your body is powerful and ruthless. In my opinion, what you're vomiting now are your own bones. If this curse isn't lifted, within 3 days at most, every bone in your body will be expelled from your mouth. Your body will shrink until you're flattened in a jar and mistaken for a pile of minced meat. At that point, you might not die, but you won't be able to walk or move, you'll need to be fed, and you'll be used as a chamber pot. What's the point of living then? Hearing this, Chu Sun's face turned deathly pale. He immediately knelt before young Master Zhao. Please, young master, save me. Cough, please, young master, save me. Cough. He no longer dared to hide anything and quickly recounted everything from seeing the precious sword to stealing it and being slapped. Young Master Zhao listened carefully to Chu Sun's story. Is she a girl? Yes, she's a girl. Very beautiful. Not quite a beauty that could topple kingdoms, but at least she's got rosy lips and white teeth. Cough cough cough. Which family's young lady is this? Are they also eyeing this lake? Young Master Zhao racked his brains for a long time, trying to recall which noble family's young lady would come here, but he couldn't figure out. Young master, do you have a way to save me? Chu Sun looked at young Master Zhao with pleading eyes, while young Master Zhao looked down at him without saying a word. Seemingly sensing the meaning in young Master Zhao's eyes, Chu Sun gritted his teeth and finally held a knife with both hands, presenting it to young Master Zhao. Not bad. Young Master Zhao gripped the hilt with one hand and picked up the knife. A fine knife. Even though young Master Zhao had seen countless treasures, He could still feel the surging spiritual energy emanating from this knife the moment it landed in his hand. With a flick of his wrist, a white light swept across Chu Sun's head. Chu Sun felt a chill on his scalp and noticed several hairs had fallen out. Young Master Zhao picked up a hair from the ground and laughed. Instantaneous cut, truly remarkable. Chu Sun felt he was probably bald, but he could only chuckle awkwardly and look at young Master Zhao expectantly. Don't worry, young Master Zhao reassured Chu Sun. After the river god's sacrifice tomorrow, you can have the river god perform the exorcism ritual, and I'll protect you. To put it simply, while the curse inside your body is powerful, it's not insurmountable. A strong flush of yin energy can wash it away. Hearing this, Chu Sun finally breathed a sigh of relief, but his gaze lingered on the precious sword. Young Master Zhao casually placed the sword beside him. I will give the treasure you presented to me to my grandfather. My family will definitely pay close attention to you then. Chu Sun could only nod awkwardly. When Zuo Chen returned to the escort agency, before he even entered, he found a large group of escorts gathered outside, their faces anxious, searching frantically, as if they wanted to uproot trees to see how many earthworms were in a pit, or drain rivers to see how many fish were in the low-lying areas. What was going on? Puzzled, he stepped into the courtyard and immediately saw Liu Lazy looking up and howling, Taoist master, I'm so sorry. Then came hysterical wailing. Zuo Chen's forehead was covered in sweat. What was going on? Why was this like a funeral procession? I'm not dead yet. He walked behind Liu Lazy and patted him on the shoulder. Liu Lazy jolted awake, turned around, and saw Zuo Chen, wailing even louder, Taoist master. It's gone, it's gone. What? Explain clearly. Liu Lazy wanted to explain, but he was crying so hard that something seemed stuck in his throat, his mouth and tongue were not coherent, and he couldn't utter a complete sentence for a long time. Kai, however, came over and explained what had happened to Zuo Chen. Zuo Chen was both amused and exasperated. He hadn't expected such a thing to happen in just a short time. He had only just gotten a knife, and it had been stolen. I don't recognize the thief's face. He had a stiff face, he was probably wearing a human skin mask. He came prepared. What? Seeing Liu Lazy crying so hard, Zuo Chen simply shook his head. It's just a knife, the person is still alive, that's the most important thing. But this was a gift from you, Taoist master. Liu Lazy clearly couldn't get over that turtle in his heart. Kai, however, was quick-witted. Hearing Liu Lazy's words, she chuckled and said, Head, a term for in Chinese martial arts novels, everyone knows that your knife is a treasure. A common man is innocent, but possessing a treasure is a crime. You managed to defeat this thief today, but what if a noble family comes one day? Or what if a prince comes? That's true. If someone else had said this to him, he would most likely have retorted, it's easy for you to say that when you're not the one suffering. It wasn't your thing that was stolen. But he couldn't refute Kai and the Taoist priest's words. After crying for a while, Liu Lazy seemed to have come to terms with it. He wiped his face, barely stopping his tears, and bowed to Zuo Chen, saying, I'm sorry for making you laugh. Alice, perhaps that treasure is not meant for me. You don't need to be too disappointed. The ki infused into that knife dissipates upon seeing blood, so it's not suitable for someone like you who runs a bodyguard escort. Zuo Chen chuckled. Ah. Liu Lazy scratched his head. It did seem unsuitable for someone like him who lived on the edge of a knife. Let me teach you some lightness skill. Zuo Chen thought for a moment and decided to slightly modify his shrinking earth to an inch technique to teach Liu Lazy. Really? Thank you so much, Taoist priest. Liu Lazy was overjoyed. A martial arts skill was far more valuable than a precious sword. Inside the Bailao society, a large group of employees were busy running around, but Su Fuge remained locked in his courtyard. He was alone, his face pale, clutching his abdomen. Earlier, he had been kicked by the Taoist priest, and a unique energy had entered his danshan. He had thought he could expel it with his own cultivation, but unexpectedly, his 30 years of accumulated cultivation were being steadily eroded by the strange energy in his abdomen. That damn Taoist priest. What kind of trick did he use on me? He cursed inwardly, but there was nothing he could do. If this continued, all his cultivation would vanish, leaving only this wisp of strange energy. How could he then manage the Bailao society? If it were exposed, someone would stab him in the back the next day. Tomorrow is the official river god sacrifice, But we still don't know what that old bastard Chu Sun is up to. Su Fuga's head throbbed with pain, and he was utterly helpless. Could it be that the White Elder Society was about to be destroyed? This thought flashed through his mind, filling him with pessimism and despair. Composing himself, Su Fuga got up and went to the window. His eyes fell upon the rolling ripples of Whitehead Lake, its waves shimmering milky white in the sunlight. I hope the river god will remember our past kindness and help me get rid of this key in my body tomorrow, Su Fuga sighed to himself. Chapter 21 Another Sacrifice to the River God. Every year, King's House City holds a river god worship ceremony, but this year is a bit different. There were 2 ceremonies this year. The Bai family sent a respected manager to explain that this year was special. The first ceremony was called the small ceremony, and the second the grand ceremony, to be respectable enough to honor the river god's high status. However, everyone in the city sensed something was amiss. This was mainly due to the strange incident that occurred yesterday afternoon. The Bai family found the most handsome scholar and the most beautiful young lady in the city. They first gave the scholar's family several loads of silver, and the scholar happily went with them. But when they arrived at the young lady's house, the wealthy merchant refused to let her out. That night, a strange wind blew through the merchant's house, and the next morning, the young lady was gone. The merchant was furious and, with his servants, rushed to the Bai family's house, intending to knock on the door. The Bai family refused to see them, and only after being annoyed by the commotion did they release one of the managers. We're offering sacrifices to the river god today, we'll discuss everything else tomorrow. The wealthy merchant refused. If he sacrificed himself to the river god today, where would he see his daughter tomorrow? Would he jump into the river too? A conflict ensued, several servants died, and the wealthy merchant never saw his daughter again. The news spread like wildfire throughout King's House City. Anyone with eyes could see that they were capturing young boys and girls to sacrifice to the river god. The Bai family had done this before, but they just randomly grabbed 2 from poor families, and with generous payments, no one complained much. Why were they targeting wealthy families today? Rumors and speculations swirled in the streets and alleys of the city, but none of this bothered the Bai family. Su Fuga looked at the man and woman with their eyes closed and nodded with satisfaction. They were dressed in bright red clothes, like 2 wedding gowns. They were the most handsome scholar and the most beautiful young lady in the city, dressed up. Even Su Fuga found them very attractive. I hope the river god will be satisfied with these 2. Su Fuga sighed softly, then waved his arm, lift the sedan chair. The Bailao Wei men immediately gathered around the 2 seemingly asleep couple, quickly placing them in a bright red sedan chair. Then 4 strong young men came out, each lifting a corner of the chair, and with a strong push, they lifted it up. The accompanying procession included people playing suanas, banging drums, and dancing with long red ribbons. Su Fuga led the way, proclaiming, "The sedan chair curtains are rolled up in joy, let us celebrate sharing sweet dumplings in our shared chamber. Offering sacrifices to the river god. Offering sacrifices to the river god." Cough cough cough. Chu Sun, supported by his men, arrived at the altar by the river. Last night, he coughed up 23 pieces of bone, and this morning, compared to his men, he had shrunk by 2 inches. His skin and flesh even sagged a bit. Young Master Zhao was right. If this coughing continued, he'd probably be nothing but a pile of rotten flesh in a couple of days. Chu Sun felt a mix of resentment, hatred, and helplessness. He resented himself for seeing the treasured sword but not being able to suppress his desire, ultimately ending up like this. He hated the woman who slapped him on the head, it was because of her that he was now half dead. He also felt deeply helpless. Even young Master Zhao said it was a skilled fighter. What ability did he have to subdue him? That's how the world is, survival of the fittest. In King's House City, he was the one wielding the knife, while in the entire Great Liang, he was merely a fish on the chopping block. He might be stewed with tofu one day. In the end, he'd have gained nothing, and even lost several pounds of bones. Composing himself, Chu Sun walked to the riverside altar. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small box. Opening the box, he found 2 tiny dolls, one gold and one jade, about the size of a thumb. The 2 children huddled together, trembling. The moment Chu Sun opened the box, they tried to jump out and run away, but Chu Sun simply reached out and grabbed them back. "You 2 are treasures I bought at great expense. If you run away now, how am I supposed to offer sacrifices to the river god?" Chu Sun said with a cold smile. The 2 children immediately burst into tears. But Chu soon ignored them completely, placing them directly on the altar. He then stuck an incense stick behind him. The incense burned, and the rising smoke transformed into a chain in the air, binding the two children. "Young master, I'm almost done preparing things here," Chu soon said respectfully, turning to young master Zhao, who was sitting in a chair behind him. "Alright, let's begin the ceremony then." Young master Zhao was currently seated inside a tent surrounded by layers of gauze, making it impossible to see what was inside from the outside. Some sat on small stools, sipping tea alone, others had several beautiful women keep them company in their tents, still others simply sought to enhance their mystique. In Chu Sun's eyes, however, it all seemed more like the affectation of a superior. Ignoring all this, Chu Sun walked to the main altar, where his subordinates immediately offered him 3 incense sticks. Chu Sun lit the 3 sticks, straightened his arms, and leaned forward. "May the winds and rains bring peace and prosperity to the family, may the river gods protect all directions." Offering sacrifices to the river god. "Taoist, what are we doing here today?" Last night, Zuo Chen had instructed Liu Lazy for 2 or 3 hours, and under Zuo Chen's modifications, the shrinking the earth to an inch technique had been transformed into other ultimate moves. These Jianghu people also possessed some Taoist cultivation, although they were far inferior to Zuo Chen in terms of qi. However, by following Zuo Chen's breathing techniques, they could travel 1,000 miles a day on foot, or even throw a straw mat onto the Yangtze River's waves and step across the meadow to cross the river. The methods were already considered unbelievable by Liu Lazy, practically top-tier techniques on the Wanshu sect ranking. Just as Liu Lazy was planning to spend a month or 2 mastering these 2 unique skills before teaching them to his incompetent disciples, Zuo Chen suddenly led him to the shore of Beishao Lake. This left Liu Lazy completely bewildered. "Someone's going to throw treasures into the lake later, so I'm here to retrieve some," Zuo Chen said with a smile. "Huh?" Liu Lazy's eyes widened. "You mean this is a sacrifice to the river god? Those are treasures that 2 big gangs offer to the river god. Even if you're not afraid of the 2 gangs in the city, you should at least avoid the river god." Hearing Liu Lazy's words, Zuo Chen didn't say anything, but Kie beside him burst out laughing. "Liu Lazy? What's so funny?" Zuo Chen didn't explain, but simply turned his gaze to the lake. "Here it comes. New book seeking recommendations, favorites, and monthly tickets. Thank you all for your support. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22 Where did I, the river god, go? As the resounding cry of offering sacrifices to the river god was uttered, Chu soon grabbed the golden boy and jade girl figurines in his hands and hurled them towards the center of the lake. The 2 children, as if disturbed by yin energy, instantly stopped crying and fussing. The last vestiges of their spirituality seemed to dissipate, and they instantly transformed into ordinary gold and jade artifacts, swirling in the air before splashing into Baisho Lake. Across the lake, seeing that the Wangxiang gang had already made their move, Su Fuga dared not delay. He waved his hand and shouted, "Send the newlyweds to their bridal chamber." His 4 men stopped on the wooden planks already laid out by the riverbank, released them, and the sedan chair landed directly on top of the planks before plunging into the lake. The entire sedan chair submerged, a few pieces of red cloth floated ashore, but the people disappeared completely, not even a bubble rose to the surface. Seeing this, Su Fuga knew that his sacrifice to the river god had been successful. Next, all that was left was to wait for the river god's response. It was midday, and generally, the river god would respond shortly after receiving the offerings. Sometimes he would be angry, demanding they prepare another batch. Other times he would appear and tell them the preparations were good and he was very pleased. However, this time, Su Fuga waited for the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. It seemed nothing had happened. What was going on? Su Fuga was slightly dumbfounded. Seeing no ripples or bubbles on the lake, and no change in the weather, there was definitely no sign of the river god appearing. Could it be that the Wangxiang gang on the other side was up to no good, preventing him from even summoning the river god? Across the entire Beishao Lake, Su Fuga glanced into the distance. He could clearly see that nothing had happened on Chu Sun's side of the lake either. The river god hadn't gone to their side, and they hadn't removed the altar and left. In other words, The Wangxiang gang hadn't summoned the river god either? What? Where did my great river god go? Su Fuga felt utterly disoriented for a moment. On the other side of the lake, Chu Sun was clearly finding this situation even more difficult to accept. He rushed to the lakeside, kneeling and crawling on the wet, muddy ground, gasping for breath. River god, where are you? Why won't you come out? Didn't you make a promise with a nobleman? Why won't you come out? He called for a long time, but there was no response. Finally, he could only cast his pleading gaze into the gauze curtain. Don't panic. Young Master Zhao's voice came from inside the gauze curtain. He seemed to have done some calculations, then suddenly exclaimed, Huh? The river god is no longer in the lake? What? Chu Sun's eyes widened in disbelief. I spent so much money, used so many tricks to get the golden boy and jade girl. Wasn't it said that as long as I got them, they would come out and make me the local tyrant of King's House City? How much effort did I put in? How many tricks did I fall for? How many connections did I make? How many people did I kill? I even sold my genitals, and the river god ran away. Does that mean I have no way to drive the Bai family out? Then, am I going to die? Chu Sun cried out twice towards the lake shore, coughed several times, and spat out a few crumbs into the lake. Watching the bones gradually sink to the bottom, Chu Sun felt as if a jar had been smashed in his heart, a bitter and astringent feeling washing over him, leaving him dizzy and disoriented. Like a walking corpse, he staggered towards the gauze curtain. Pushing aside layer after layer of gauze curtains, Chu Sun felt as if he had entered a deep, bottomless maze. He didn't know how far he had walked, but finally he arrived at the very center of the gauze curtain. There was a table and a chair there, with a piece of wood and a fan on the table, and a paper figure on the chair. Where was young Master Zhao? It was as if even the words spoken inside the curtain had been just Chu Sun's illusion. This was the storyteller's trick behind the curtain, a low-class thing, which young Master Zhao had used to escape. He, Chu Sun, was nothing but a discarded pawn. Ha, ha 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 ha. Chu Sun suddenly laughed 3 times, as if some energy within him had dissipated. Then, he coughed violently, spitting out a milky white, turbid, round pill. The pill, like a bright moon, tumbled half a foot through the air before bouncing twice on the ground and finally rolling away, landing on the bluestone slab. The life force within Chu Sun also quickly dissipated, leaving him shriveled and lifeless as he collapsed to the ground. By the river, Zuo Chen watched as both sides threw their offerings into the lake, deciding that the time was almost up. He first turned to look at Liu Lazy. Chief is a term used to describe a powerful figure in the martial arts world. The Bai family in King's House City is running rampant in the north of the city. They have no one to rely on, and they're pinning their hopes on the ethereal river god. Don't you think yours Hengjiu escort agency is more suitable to take over their position? Liu Lazy had been in the martial arts world for a long time and was very shrewd. His expression changed several times after hearing Zuo Chen's words before he finally looked towards the center of the lake. But every year we worship the river god. You naturally won't need to worship the river god anymore, Zuo Chen said. How can the so-called river god compare to the 2 hands of fishermen? Liu Lazy trembled upon hearing this, not because Zuo Chen's words were particularly reasonable, but because he wouldn't need to worship the river god anymore. The powerful families couldn't say such things, they didn't have the power. The princes might be able to say such things, they were powerful enough, but they looked down on a small place like King's Hao. But the Taoist priest could say such things. Having made his decision, Liu Lazy nodded repeatedly. Rest assured, Taoist master, there will be no more river god sacrifices. He hesitated for a moment, then asked, should I go back and call for help? Go ahead. With that approval, Liu Lazy ran towards the escort agency with great joy. He even managed to use the technique of traveling 1,000 miles a day with a single burst of speed, making him look like a horse galloping from afar. Taoist master, are you planning to seize King's House City? Kie asked Zuo Chen. Zuo Chen shook his head and said, how could that be? I'm leaving King's House City tomorrow. I just think it's inappropriate that the person in charge of King's House City now is the one who throws 2 children into the river every year. Ah. Leaving tomorrow? Kie didn't even hear the second half of his sentence. Can you take me with you? I thought you would choose to stay in King's House City. What's the point of me staying here? Kie chuckled, I have no livelihood here, and no good estate. I might as well learn skills from you, Taoist master. Then wait for me on the shore. Zuo Chen lifted his Taoist robe, activated his turtle breathing technique, and slung his bamboo basket over his shoulder. Taoist master? What are you doing? Saving people and getting some travel expenses. He stepped into the water with one foot, and the waves automatically parted to both sides, creating a path for him. Chapter 23 The Underwater Mansion. Activating his turtle breathing technique, Zuo Chen floated in the middle of Whitehead Lake. The surrounding water remained impervious to his touch. Zuo Chen felt as if he were strolling through an aquarium from his previous life. Gathering his ki in his eyes, his vision instantly pierced through the previously murky water. Passing by the fish, floating weeds, and fish balls thrown down by someone, Zuo Chen spotted a large red sedan chair at the bottom of the lake. He approached the sedan chair and saw a handsome young man and a beautiful young woman inside. They were dressed in bright red new clothes, seemingly celebrating their wedding day. However, their faces were deathly pale, their souls had left their bodies, indicating they had only recently died. Zuo Chen moved closer to them, extending his index fingers and gently touching their foreheads. The two quickly regained their color, appearing as if they were asleep. He then moved to the back of the sedan chair, enveloping it in ki, and with a slight exertion, the entire sedan chair floated on the water. Several fish, drawn by the aura, circled the red sedan chair. They came beneath it, acting as if supporting the bearers, carrying the wooden planks and red cloth towards the lake. Kai, waiting idly for Zuo Chen on the riverbank, suddenly saw bubbles popping on the lake's surface, and the bright red sedan chair was lifted directly from the center. Below the chair, fish surged and churned, like clusters of flowers or rolling waves, and faintly, one could hear the sounds of suona horns, gongs, and firecrackers, like a procession sending off a newlywed. Kai's eyes widened, and she rubbed them hard, thinking she was seeing things. Zuo Chen, at the bottom of the river, was unaware of the trouble he had caused his cheap apprentice, Kai. After saving this year's sacrificial offering, he turned and walked to the other side of the river. Soon, he found his target, a pair of ornaments lying in the sand at the bottom of the lake. With a flick of his sleeve, the fine sands in the lake was scattered, and the golden boy and jade maiden floated into Zuo Chen's hands. He gently touched and played with them, a hint of surprise appearing in his eyes. These two little creatures were brimming with spiritual energy. According to Taoist scriptures, they were natural treasures. Yet someone had used yin energy to attack their spiritual energy, almost destroying the foundation of these treasures. What a waste. Zuo Chen considered himself immortal, whether it was worldly gold and silver or treasures formed from mountain spirits, he didn't covet them, but he still felt a pang of regret if someone urinated into an antique. He infused spiritual energy into the golden boy and jade maiden, and the two thumb-sized dolls finally awoke with a start. Seeing that they were still in the water, held by a Taoist he didn't recognize, they thought they had indeed been offered to the river god and burst into tears. Zuo Chen chuckled, explaining patiently for a while before the two little ones realized they had been rescued. The children then knelt in Zuo Chen's palms, repeatedly kowtowing to him as if to be his master, their pitiful faces hoping he would take them away. "You can come with me for now," Zuo Chen said with a beaming smile. Anyone would be happy to receive a treasure, and he was no exception. After taking the golden boy and jade girl into his arms, Zuo Chen's gaze fell to the bottom of Whitehead Lake. There lay the Fathead Fish's underwater palace. The Fathead Fish had said that the palace contained countless gold and silver treasures, all donated by the White Elder Association over the years. Zuo Chen wasn't so interested in the silver, he was more interested in seeing if the Fathead Fish had found any clues related to cultivation. Even if it only grasped two techniques, the trip wouldn't be in vain. With a thought, Zuo Chen floated above the underwater palace and, upon closer inspection, saw a large courtyard in the center of the lake, teeming with coral. It shone brightly and was quite magnificent. But beside the courtyard lay a pile of white bones, making it impossible to tell whether this was the river god's dwelling or a mass grave in the wilderness. Zuo Chen swam to the mass grave, looked at the corpses, and sighed deeply. Those who die unjustly in the water need a substitute. I wonder who set this damned rule. The Taoist robe moved with a flick of the wrist, releasing spiritual energy in unison. Invisible golden thread swept across the graveyard, cleansing it of all filth. From then on, the bones were nothing more than bones. Zuo Chen stood there, as if receiving a bow from an unseen figure. After a long while, he continued swimming towards the water palace. Entering the courtyard, he saw the center of the entire space covered with the gold and silver treasures, some as large as bricks, others gleaming with a bright, night-shining pearl. The fathead fish was right, he was indeed very wealthy. Zuo Chen thought for a moment, then took 1 silver ingot, 1 gold ingot, and 1 night-shining pearl for his future travel expenses. He didn't take much else. He didn't yet possess the ability to store objects, so he couldn't take more even if he wanted to. Then, Zuo Chen began searching for his real target. His eyes scanned the surroundings. Searching for books underwater was obviously impossible. This time, Zuo Chen would find bamboo slips or things containing spiritual energy. There really is something. There were no bamboo slips or stone slabs, but Zuo Chen discovered a jade pendant buried at the very bottom of the treasure pile. It emitted a faint, captivating spiritual energy. Turning over the valuables, Zuo Chen quickly retrieved the pendant. The pendant appeared unremarkable, it was neither inscribed nor carved. If it weren't for the barely perceptible spiritual energy, Zuo Chen would likely have mistaken it for one of the small offerings the White Elder Society had made over the years. The fathead fish possessed no spiritual energy, so it seemed that after it fell into his hands, he hadn't figured out its significance and simply tossed it into the treasure pile as an ordinary object. After taking the pendant, Zuo Chen didn't rush to leave. He infused it with a wisp of spiritual energy, and immediately a resonance formed between them. Closing his eyes slightly, Zuo Chen sensed a message seemingly coming from the pendant. Even with countless wondrous techniques, it's difficult to slay the great evil of Zhongzhao. No wonder Master is unwilling to descend the mountain, saying he wants to avoid the world and its calamities. No, even if the disaster is averted, everyone in the world will die. Master can ascend to immortality, but the people of the world cannot. I will leave behind this extraordinary technique. If any fellow Taoist can learn it, I hope it will bring peace to the world and help us fight for destiny. The contents of the jade pendant were fragmented, most of the text blurry and indistinct, leaving Zuo Chen unable to understand clearly. However, he memorized a few key words: Zhongzhao, wondrous methods, a master capable of ascending to immortality. It seemed there were still cultivators in this world. Zuo Chen continued to absorb the contents of the wondrous method, but after fully digesting and absorbing all the information from the jade pendant, his expression became slightly strange. This wondrous method was called flowers bloom in an instant. According to the description in the jade pendant, this technique allowed one to spit out lotus flowers from their mouth and tread on flowers that bloomed under their feet. Wearing a flower wreath on one's head provided protection from evil magic, making it a method to avert disaster. Its profound methods were indeed extraordinary, but unfortunately, like before, the wondrous method was somewhat incomplete, and Zuo Chen would likely need to figure out and fill in most of the details himself. After putting the jade pendant away, Zuo Chen rose from the water and strode towards the lake. In the blink of an eye, he had leaped out of the lake and landed on the shore. Kia was still examining the sedan chair when she saw Zuo Chen emerge, and immediately rushed to greet him warmly. "Send them both home later," Zuo Chen said. Just as he finished speaking, a commotion erupted from within the city not far away. Faintly, Liu Lazy's booming voice could be heard. "Su Fuge, you sacrificed a living person, a heinous crime. The government won't do anything, but today I'll arrest you on their behalf." Chapter 24 Change of Ownership. The river god didn't react, leaving the leaders and managers of the Bailao gang beside the altar completely bewildered. What had allowed the Bailao gang to maintain its foothold in the city for so long? It was precisely because they served the river god well. When the river god was pleased, they could retrieve whomever's corpse they wanted, or drown whomever they wished. Otherwise, in a direct confrontation, they might not be able to defeat the Wangxiang gang. This was why Chu Sun was risking his life to seize the right to worship the river god from them. Only in this way could they act with impunity while boating on Baisha Lake. But now, an unexpected problem had arisen. The river god was gone? The altars on both sides had been set up for almost an hour, and neither the river god of the Bailao gang nor the Wangxiang gang's side had appeared. Su Fuge felt a sense of foreboding, a mixture of irritation and slight fear. "Chairman, river god, is he busy today?" A manager leaned closer to Su Fuge and whispered in his ear. "River god busy? What the hell could a river god possibly have to do? And even if he really did, why did he choose today? We've prepared so many treasures for him today, shouldn't he be at home accepting the gifts?" He didn't understand. Su Fuge really didn't understand. "How about we just let it go for today?" the manager asked again. "Let it go? That wouldn't do. If there really wasn't a river god, The fragrance gang would come back tomorrow. Su Fuga glared at the manager. How's your water tendon bone training going? Not bad, not perfect, but quite advanced. The manager didn't know why Su Fuga suddenly asked this question, so he could only answer honestly. Then I'll trouble you to go into the lake and personally invite the river god up. Su Fuga sneered. Huh? Me? The manager pointed to his nose with his index finger. It's you. Su Fuga kicked the steward hard in the backside, sending him sprawling into the river with a thud. Su Fuga glared at the steward from the bank. If you can't summon the river god, you can live with him in the river from now on. The steward's face turned green. This small brute was supposed to go down into the river to summon the river god? Wasn't that just feeding the fish? While he was still hesitating, a waiter rushed to Su Fuga's side in a panic. Boss. Something terrible has happened. Those bastards from the Zhengjiu escort agency and the rice shop that took the girl have teamed up and stormed into our venue. What? Su Fuga's eyes widened, a surge of anger rising within him. He had considered many possibilities, but he hadn't expected Liu Lazy to take advantage of the situation. Su Fuga. You sacrificed a living person, a heinous crime. The government won't do anything, but today I'll arrest you on their behalf. Liu Lazy's voice rang out from outside the altar, and Su Fuga was filled with both anxiety and rage. His gang's most capable protector had already been kicked to death by Liu Lazy, and his own power was now almost gone. His men were unsettled because they hadn't summoned the river god, and in this situation, they were attacking the bodyguard agency that had come to attack. I'll curse your ancestors. Just as Su Fuga had predicted, the guards at the altar couldn't stop the members at all, and they were directly allowed to rush in. Liu Lazy was at the head, followed by several of Su Fuga's acquaintances. All wealthy merchants who had been suppressed by the Bailaohu, White Elder Society, in recent years. Among them, the most resentful was the rice shop owner, whose daughter had just been kidnapped yesterday and beaten by the Bailaohu's men, and now his eyes were bloodshot. When he saw Su Fuga, his resentment almost materialized into a tangible knife. Staring at Su Fuga with hatred for 2 or 3 breaths, the rice shop owner suddenly bowed deeply to Liu Lazy. Captain Liu, we know you are a chivalrous and righteous man. We only hope you can kill this old thief Su Fuga and avenge our daughter. From now on, our rice shop will fully support you. We'll follow you no matter what you do. Old man me. You're crazy. Su Fuga was flustered, but still kept a straight face and became angry. Liu Lazy is tasteless, and you're following him in his nonsense. If you anger the river god, your whole family will be buried with him. The river god's reputation was still well known. Hearing this, everyone except the rice shop owner and Liu Lazy showed a hint of hesitation, their eyes looking at the lake in fear, afraid that the weather would change and the waves would surge. The river god ate my daughter. Even if he comes out today, I will make him pay with his life. The rice shop owner squeezed out these words through gritted teeth. You, old man me, you've gone mad. Seeing that even the river god couldn't scare the other side, Su Fuga's legs went weak, and he stumbled back several steps. When he came to his senses, he was already on the riverbank. Liu Lazy revealed a set of gleaming white teeth. Having dropped his precious sword, he grabbed a sandalwood stick and approached Su Fuga. Su Fuga, you keep calling me the river god. Where's your river god? Why isn't he saving you? Beads of cold sweat streamed down his face, his pale face revealing his inner terror. River god? Where is the river god? River god. River god, where are you? 10 years. I've been offering sacrifices to you for 10 years. How much silver have I spent? 10 pairs of young boys and girls have I thrown away. Where are you? A man in his 40s, who had seen countless storms and witnessed countless deaths, Su Fuga felt as if a gaping hole had been ripped into his heart. 2 large tears streamed down his face, and he burst into tears. The men surrounding him exchanged bewildered glances. This crying was rather shameful. Su Fuga cried for several breaths when he suddenly felt his ankle being grabbed and pulled violently into the water. He initially thought it was the manager he had kicked in, but when he turned around, he saw the manager still soaking in the water, his face blank. Su Fuga looked down sharply and discovered that his legs were covered with countless hands. 9 on his left leg, all the wrists of strong young men, 9 on his right, slender and delicate like green onions. Wait, I. Su Fuga tried to struggle, but his cultivation had already been reduced by 8 or 9/10. How could he possibly withstand the power of 2 nines? Before he could even scream, He was pulled into the lake, leaving only a whirlpool. A short while later, Su Fuga floated to the surface, his face pale and his body swollen. He had drowned. Su Fuga, who started out retrieving corpses and was an excellent swimmer, had ultimately drowned in the very lake he knew best, Bai Shou Lake. Those on the lakeshore were stunned. The lake's manager nearly wet himself in fear. Frantically swimming to shore, patting himself up and down, afraid of losing a piece of flesh. Seeing their leader dead, and their most capable protector buried yesterday, the remaining members of the Bailao Society instantly lost their will to fight, simply kneeling before Liu Lazy and his men to beg for mercy. Less than half an incense stick had burned since Liu Lazy uttered his bold declaration, and the Qingzhou City Bailao Society had crumbled into a pile of dust. It was clear to everyone that Qingzhou City. It looks like it's going to change hands soon. Chapter 25. A bridal sedan chair falls from the sky. It didn't take long to incorporate the remaining members of the Bailao Way. The Bailao Way were just a bunch of men struggling to make a living. They didn't earn much, so why would they fight to the death? Seeing Su Fuga dead, this loosely organized group of Jianghu people, essentially, people of the underworld, immediately crumbled. Their morale collapsed, and so did their numbers. Liu Lazy and the wealthy merchants of the city quickly subdued the remaining members of the Bailao Way. Of course, there were some stubborn individuals within the Bailao Way. In the Bailao Way courtyard, a young man glanced at the old, weak, rich, and fat people standing behind him, gritted his teeth, and pulled a white headscarf to tie around his head. Once the headscarf was tightly bound, he looked like someone in mourning. Aunties, sisters-in-law, uncles, and grandfathers, I'll take my servants out to scout ahead. You all stay in the courtyard. With that, the young man picked up a pitchfork and led a few strong men out of the courtyard. Behind him, the wailing continued unabated, the loudest coming from a woman who cried like a baby. Fuga, how could you die? You can't die. Her cries drowned out the wails of everyone else around her, as if they were insignificant. This was Su Fuga's legal wife, a local celebrity who always followed him around, dominating the household and acting like a spoiled child. During the day, she was always arguing with Su Fuga, complaining about this and that, but Su Fuga, being afraid of and doting on his wife, spoiled her even more, making her even more arrogant. Outsiders always wondered why such a powerful man like Su Fuga had married such a shrew. But no one expected that this woman would cry like this after Su Fuga's death. After a while, most people were exhausted and gathered together, their faces filled with fear and their expressions utterly blank. Aside from a few dim-witted hotheads, most of those still resisting were Su Fuga's deep-seated cronies. From Su Fuga's relatives to his prized dogs, this group knew exactly what was going on. They could reason with others. If Su Fuga died, they could simply find new livelihoods. But not them. With Su Fuga dead, they seemed alive, but in reality, they were dead too. The young man who had rushed out earlier was full of energy and felt it was pointless to just lie there and wait to die. But the older generation knew that the tide had turned, and they alone had no chance of turning the tide. Sure enough, not long after, the sounds of fighting erupted outside, followed by a head spinning through the air before landing in the yard. Thud. The head slammed onto the ground, rolled twice, leaving a long trail of blood, and the white cloth tied to the head fluttered in the wind. It was the young man from before. Seeing the man die and his head fall to the ground, the hearts of Su Fuga's confidants finally died. Han Dao entered the mansion, but instead of a swordsman, a stranger appeared, dressed in black and wielding a precious sword. The swordsman carried a wine gourd, spitting wine onto his blade. Someone in the city paid for your lives. You won't be leaving here today. A flash of light, and only agonizing screams remained in the courtyard. By the time Liu Lazy and his group arrived at the Bailao Way compound, not a single living person was to be seen, only headless corpses and neatly arranged heads. The swordsman who had committed the murders was nowhere to be found. Captain Liu, if it weren't for you, I probably would never have been able to avenge this. The rice shop owner gripped Liu Lazy's hand, tears streaming down his face. It was just a small favor, Liu Lazy chuckled sheepishly. If it weren't for the Taoist priest's guidance, Liu Lazy felt he would never have been able to seize this opportunity to take the position in the Qingzhou gang. At the same time, Liu Lazy was also somewhat curious. Who slaughtered Su Fuga's entire family? He had considered it himself, but ultimately decided against it. To kill the entire previous family so soon after taking over was disloyal and lacked any sense of justice. All the wealthy merchants and the city's residents were watching him. Having committed such a heinous act of killing, who would dare entrust the position of governor of Qingzhou to him? Most importantly, the Taoist priest probably wouldn't approve of someone who had committed murder being in charge. But unexpectedly, someone had done the dirty work for him. As Liu Lazy pondered this, his gaze couldn't help but drift towards Boss Mi, who was wailing in front of him. Boss Mi didn't notice the strange look in Liu Lazy's eyes and continued to cry bitterly. Only when the other wealthy merchants couldn't bear to watch any longer and rushed over to comfort him did he finally stop crying. "Please forgive my distress, gentlemen. I'm really not feeling well today, so I'll head back now." Seeing that he was practically in shock, Liu Lazy and the merchants couldn't stop him and could only watch him stagger away. After he walked away, the group huddled together again, discussing how to divide the Bailao Wei's business. Meanwhile, Old Man Mi staggered into the street, where the surrounding streets were bustling with activity, everyone talking about the day's major events. Even the most simple rural farmers could offer their opinions on the day's events. The downfall of the Bailao Wei was of little concern to most of them. The business of retrieving corpses was inherently about exploiting the people, and the Bailao Wei, having allied themselves with a river god, could kill whomever they wanted, retrieve whose corpse they desired. Over the years, many people in Qingzhou City had suffered at their hands. Aside from a few who sold their children for a fortune, almost no one spoke well of them. The city was as if it were a festival. Old Man Mi looked around, but couldn't find his pitiful daughter. Though surrounded by children and animals, she was utterly alone. His eyes reddened again, and large tears streamed down his face. After a few sobs, he suddenly heard a child exclaim beside him, "Look at the sky. There's a bridal sedan chair in the sky." Old Man Mi suddenly saw petals falling from the sky, some pink, some yellow, drifting in the wind. He looked up and saw a large, bright red sedan chair slowly descending from the sky, landing before him like a feather. The red curtain covering the sedan chair was lifted by the upward wind, revealing two people lying on their sides. Old Man Mi immediately recognized the girl in the sedan chair, dressed in a bright red robe. He was certain it was his daughter. Old Man Mi, as if possessed, stumbled towards the sedan chair and reached out to lift the curtain. Once inside, he lifted the woman's veil, saw his daughter's face, and wept uncontrollably. "Daughter, daughter, my daughter is back." The daughter, dressed in bright red, groggily opened her eyes and stared blankly at her father. "Grandpa. What's wrong?" "Nothing, it's good that you're back. It's good that you're back." Old Man Mi held his daughter's hand tightly, afraid that she would leave him again. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.